Good morning. You are watching KBC Channel 1 and are in time for live proceedings from the National Assembly. It is Wednesday, the 3rd of July, 2019. Wednesday is the day when members of the National Assembly hold two sittings, one in the morning, another in the afternoon. The morning sitting, such as this one, reserved for private members' bills and motions. It is the time that they use to prosecute their issues, bills, motions that they have put together, of course, on behalf of their constituents, the people they represent in the National Assembly. And this is the time to bring those issues on the floor of the House for discussions. However, this morning there shall be a procedural motion seeking an exemption of business from provisions of the standing orders, and this is Standing Order 43 specifically. It is a motion that will be moved by the leader of Majority Party, and it is one that seeks to have an issue to be discussed that is not a private member's bill or motion. And of course, if members agree to that, then this morning discussions shall also include another matter that is not necessarily fronted personally by the members of the National Assembly. The Law of Contract Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 1 of the year 2019. This one was introduced in the House last week, and debate also was conducted right here in the National Assembly. It was concluded, in fact, and this morning all that is needed is for question to be put in order to determine whether it shall be proceeding to the next stage, which will be amendments in a committee of the whole House. The Law of Contract Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 1, speaks to amendment of the Law of Contract Act, Cap 23, and the proposal here is to amend this particular law so that in case of a default by a principal borrower, then the creditor should first endeavor to realize assets of the principal borrower before proceeding to realize assets of the guarantor. And this being based on the premise that currently, or what has been happening, is that once someone has borrowed money and they default, then what usually happens is that persons who have guaranteed this particular individual are the ones who are obligated to pay up or to cover for this shortfall. And so if this particular law is passed, then it means that there will be some sort of reprieve for the guarantor, meaning that the borrower will first have to, or rather the lender will ensure that the borrower pays up before a guarantor can be pursued. The Kenya Uwezo Fund Bill, National Assembly Bill number 42 of the year 2019, will be coming up for the first reading this morning. It is sponsored by Marakwet East Member of Parliament, Honorable David K. Bowen. And this one seeks to elevate the public finance management, otherwise known as Uwezo Fund Regulations of 2013, into an Act of Parliament. It also seeks to incorporate the Youth and Enterprise Development Funds into this particular act. It seeks to repeal the Public Finance Management Uwezo Fund Regulations of 2013, the Government Financial Management Women Enterprise Fund Regulations of 2007, and the Youth Enterprise Development Fund Order of 2007. Another bill coming up for the first reading this morning is one on the Equalization Fund, and it seeks to make it possible. It is actually sponsored by the Honorable Kasait Kamket, and it seeks to make it possible for the Equalization Fund to run as established under Article 204 of the Constitution. It proposes establishment of a board to administer the fund, and this is in instances where this fund is directly used for provisions of basic services, including water, roads, health facilities, as well as electricity to marginalized areas. And purpose is really to bring quality services and equally to all citizens. A live broadcast brought to you by the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit in conjunction with the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation. My name is Vereso Mwanga. On behalf of the entire crew, I welcome you to follow this session that will be presided over by the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Moses Cheboy, who is now in the chamber. Good morning.
Honorable members, let's pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness have appointed the offices of leaders and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of important trust in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us assembled. Grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberations in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country and of those whose interests you've committed to our charge. Amen. Order, members, we are short of the required quorum, and I therefore order the bell to be rung for 10 minutes.
If you are just joining us, it is live proceedings from the National Assembly right here in Parliament. And currently the National Assembly experiencing a quorum hitch. And the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Moses Cheboy, has directed that the quorum bell be rung according to the standing orders as approved by these very members, is that a minimum 50 are required in order for any discussions really to begin in this house, formally that is. And that is why you can see them there in their numbers clocking in. And that particular bell will continue to ring as the Sergeant at Arms keep tabs until the requisite numbers are attained. The Wednesday morning sitting reserved for private members' bills and motions, and as such we have two bills that will be coming up for the first introduction this morning, as well as a number of motions, including one sponsored by the Sirisia Member of Parliament, Honorable Major Retired John Waluke. And this one speaks to measures to bridge the trade deficit. And he argues that that deficit has been on the increase in the past few years, with the financial year 2016-2017 deficit being estimated at 1.1 trillion Kenya shillings, and that this is mainly attributable to exports worth 594 billion shillings against imports amounting to 1.7 trillion Kenya shillings, a situation driven mainly by the more than doubling of the cost of living, and this being the cost of food, machinery imports, amid what he says is slow-moving exports. And this member is concerned that this widening deficit continues to pile pressure on the Kenyan shilling against other global currencies such as the dollar, and that the high demand for the dollar to fund imports has therefore forced the Central Bank of Kenya to intervene, and therefore depleting foreign exchange reserves, even as the country continues to incur foreign debts. Discussions on this particular debate began on the morning of June 19th, 2019, and deliberations on it will still continue this morning until this matter is dispensed with. Interestingly, listed on the order paper is a motion by the Starehe Member of Parliament, Honorable Charles Njagwa Kanyi, on a review of the mandatory retirement age in the public service. And his argument is that 75% of the country's population is under the age of 35, and that the overall unemployment among the youth is at 55%. The Honorable Kanyi is facing charges in court charges of alleged incitement against foreign traders, and that case, incidentally, will be coming up for hearing today. He was arrested last Wednesday outside Parliament, actually, and he will be knowing his fate today, probably this morning. This morning, members can also look forward to a question time, which they reintroduced in the House late last year. This morning, the member for Mathare, Honorable Anthony Tomoluoch, will be seeking answers from the Cabinet Secretary, Transport, Infrastructure and Housing and Urban Development. And his concern is duplication of road classification particulars affecting roads specifically falling within his constituency, which is Mathare, and which he says leads to difficulty in the alienation of roads classified as falling under the Kenya Rural Roads Authority, KERA, and those falling within the ambit of the Kenya Urban Roads Authority, KURA. And so he really wants the Cabinet Secretary to just spell out the criteria applied to award the Special Fund for Emergency for Road Repairs purposes in Nairobi City, including the distribution in the 17 constituencies. A quorum attained, as indicated by the Sergeant at Arms. We shall have confirmation from the Deputy Speaker.
Order, members. Order, members. We now have the required quorum, and therefore business will begin.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
That particular order, we have the member for Naivasha, Honorable Kihara. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good morning. Mr. Speaker, I rise to petition on behalf of my residents, my constituents in 2 wards, Naivasha East and Biashara. And here it goes. I, the undersigned, on behalf of landowners of Naivasha Maraigushu blocks 3, 6, and 1, who are citizens of Kenya, draw the attention of the House to the following. That Ketraco, a government-registered company established to develop a high-voltage electricity infrastructure, including planning, designing, building, and maintaining electricity transmission lines. That Ketraco has been erecting electricity transmission lines across the country, and most of the time, the electricity lines are laid on private land. 3, that a framework exists for compensation of the land and property owners, which is prescribed in Ketraco's resettlement policy framework, depending on the extent to which their parcels of land are affected. That the landowners of Naivasha Maraigushu blocks 6, 3, and 1 in Naivasha East and Biashara wards have been affected by the erection of Ketraco infrastructure on their land, but no compensation has been received by the landowners. That efforts to have the matter discussed with Ketraco management have been futile. That, number 6, the matter is not pending before any court of law or any legal or constitutional body. Therefore, your humble petitioners pray that the National Assembly, through Departmental Committee on Lands, 1, recommends investigation into the objective valuation of the land in question to determine its current market value. Number 2, engages Ketraco to see to it that the petitioners receive full, fair, and prompt compensation. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, makes any other further orders deemed fit in the circumstances of the petitioners. And your petitioners will ever pray. Signed, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. I see there are a few members who want to speak to it. And actually, there are many. I do not know why this is a very popular one. The Leader of Majority? Leader of Majority then.
Chair, I really want to support the member for Naivasha because Ketraco built a line from Kindaruma all the way to Garissa, cutting across many constituencies. And they have paid, including in my constituency. Even when they even don't have documents. Some of them even didn't have a letter of allotment. So it is a mandatory. And I really want, Chair, Speaker, I want you to listen to me. I want you to bring this matter to both the Energy and the Lands Committee. That Ketraco has no choice, it must pay the people of Naivasha. Anywhere they are building those transmission lines, particularly if they passes through your compound and they are putting those big towers, they have no choice, and I support the member that Ketraco must be compelled by the 2 committees to pay the poor people affected in Naivasha.
Okay. Any other member wants to speak to this one? Yes. Honorable Wamunyinyi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I also do rise to support my colleague, Honorable Jen of Naivasha, on this particular petition, Mr. Speaker. And I wish to stress that, Mr. Speaker, it's not only, in fact, Ketraco that have been involved in this. And where is it? Where is it, Mr. Speaker? My apologies, Mr. Speaker. I was saying that I support the member for Naivasha for this, on this aspect of the petition. And I said it's not only Ketraco that have been involved in usage of land from members of the public in Kenya. And this should be considered also in the future, and they should be compelled to compensate the people that have either lost or have had their pieces of land used for the purpose of those companies, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, where there is delayed compensation, there should be consideration for interest on those compensations, Mr. Speaker. I do support.
Give 2 more members. We will start with, we'll give Honorable Atandi Anunga. You want to speak to this one or
yes,
the next one?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support the petition. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned that in the last 2 weeks, we have received more than 10 petitions touching on Ministry of Land and the Committee of Land, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, because these petitions point to the fact that we are having ineffective government agencies, more so National Lands Commission. And, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to urge the Committee of Lands that perhaps they need to consider inviting that commission to find out if they are really serving Kenyans. Because, Mr. Speaker, we cannot have each and every day petitions touching on a particular agency of government. And I think this is something that we really need to check. 10 petitions, more than 10 petitions within 2 weeks, touching on a particular matter, you know. So my concern is that I think we need to, as Parliament, we need to see whether these agencies are working, whether they are serving Kenyans, or because these petitions will continue, and Parliament may not have time to go through all these petitions effectively in time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Honorable Mutua Barasa of Kimilili. Is that Honorable Mutua Barasa?
Asante Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kunipatia hii nafasi. Pia mimi naunga mkono ile petition ya Mheshimiwa Jane Kihara na kusema kwamba taasisi tofauti za serikali lazima ziheshimu haki za raia. Hata kama wanaleta maendeleo, lakini yale maendeleo lazima pia waheshimu yale maendeleo ambayo raia tayari wameweka kwa kutumia pesa zao, na lazima swala hili la mashamba liangaliwe kwa kina, Bwana Spika. Na nafikiria pia kama bunge, najua kuna petition nyingi ambazo zimewezwa kuwekwa katika kamati tofauti za bunge hapa.
What's your point of order, Honorable Junet?
Mr. Speaker, the standing orders are very clear, Mr. Speaker, that if you use one language, you must continue with that language up to the end. All the way. Mr. Speaker, the member here is talking about petition and he's talking in Kiswahili. Can he tell us what is petition in Kiswahili? Because he chose to speak in Kiswahili. Petition, yapa petition.
Well,
Mr. Speaker, swalanyeti or something.
Honorable Junet, you're obviously right. And well, there are always difficulties with these languages that were brought on boat, you know, brought by boats and ship. So, but proceed, Honorable Member for Kimilili.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Speaker.
Try as much as possible to use the standing orders properly.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Speaker. Najua Mheshimiwa Junet Kiswahili haifahamu vizuri. Petition iko katika kamusi ya Kiswahili, Mheshimiwa Speaker. Naunga mkono. naunga mkono kwamba ili swala liangalie kwa kina. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Speaker.
Promised only 2 members, but I will give an opportunity to the Vice Chair, Energy Committee, because the petition will be taken to them. I really am curious to hear what he has to say. Now, are you speaking as the member for Endebess or as the Vice Chair?
Both, Honorable Speaker.
That will be conflicting, but let me hear you.
Okay, Honorable Speaker, you know I'm a representative of the people of Endebess, but in the committee I'm the Vice Chair. Now, one of the challenges that has recently been with the Ketraco, Honorable Speaker, in terms of compensation, because we've asked them, is that there is no national.
You see, Honorable Pukose, without having to interrupt you.
Yes.
Here, I wanted you to speak as a member for Endebess.
Yes.
When you go back to the committee, now you speak as the Vice Chair.
Yes.
So if you start answering,
now I'll speak as the member for Endebess, Honorable Speaker.
Yes. So
yes.
Speak to. You could easily be having issues.
Honorable Speaker, as the member for Endebess, Honorable Speaker, I want to support the member for Naivasha, Honorable Jane Kihara, on this petition. Honorable Speaker, we know that issues of land and Ketraco providing the transmission lines for our power for the country, they must be able to compensate, despite the fact that there is no commissioners in the National Land Commission. But taking into consideration that this House yesterday, Honorable Speaker, passed the land index bill that was mediated between the National Assembly and the Senate. Now we are waiting for the President to sign, and that should be able to speed up the issue of compensation for the people of Naivasha. So, Honorable Speaker, with those few remarks, I support the petition.
Very well. Before we go to the next order, let me recognize in the Speaker's gallery engineers from University of California visiting the National Assembly and its leadership, as Engineer Victor Korir from Kuresoi North Constituency, Sirikwa Ward, and Engineer Linus Kipkoech from Kiramwok of Bomet East, accompanied by their guardian, Albina Rono. And also in the Speaker's Gallery, I want to recognize students from the newly registered Boron Secondary School, Kuresoi North constituency of Nakuru County. Next order.
Order number 5, papers. Order number 6, notices of motions. Order number 7, questions and statements.
Well, on that particular order, we do not have a statement, so we will go straight to questions. And the questions are ordinary questions, and starting as of is Honorable Member for Mathare, Honorable Anthony Tom Oluoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to raise question number 307 of 2019. It is directed to the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware of the duplication of roads classifications affecting several roads falling within Mathare constituencies, leading to difficulties in delineation of road classifications as falling under the Kenya Rural Roads Authority, KERA, and those falling within the ambit of the Kenya Urban Roads Authority, KURA? Secondly, could the Cabinet Secretary provide a list of all the roads under the two authorities, KERA and KURA, in Mathare constituency by name and description? Thirdly, could the Cabinet Secretary also provide a list showing the contractors engaged in the last 3 financial years to undertake the works on the said roads and specify whether the works were minor repairs or construction of roads? Lastly, could the Cabinet Secretary provide details on the criteria applied to award the special funds for emergency repair purposes in Nairobi City, indicating the distribution of the awards in Nairobi 17 constituencies for the last 3 financial years, and list the contractors? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Be replied to before the Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. Next is Honorable Vincent Kemosi Mogaka, member for West Mugirango.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to Provision Standing Order 42A, subsection 5, I wish to ask question number 308 of 2019 to the Cabinet Secretary, Transport, Infrastructure, Housing, Urban Development and Public Works. 1. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide details of the local and foreign shareholders of the firm known as Africa Star Railway Operation Company and indicate the date the company was incorporated in Kenya? 2. How much money has been paid so far to the company by Kenya Railways Corporation for running the standard gauge railway, popularly known as STL? Roman 3, Mr. Speaker. What was the rationale of forming a special purpose vehicle to run the standard gauge railway, yet China Road and Bridge Corporation is capable of running the same? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Transport, Public Works and Housing. Next is the member for Kandui, Honorable Atanas Wafula Wamunyinyi Misiko.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to ask question number 309 of 2019 to the Cabinet Secretary for Lands and Physical Planning. 1. Is the Cabinet Secretary aware that public land set aside for a police station and administrative offices in the Marakarututi ward in Kandui constituents have since been irregularly allocated to private individuals? 2. Is the Cabinet Secretary further aware that some government houses and various parcels of land in Bungoma town have been converted to private use and are now owned or occupied by individuals? 3. What measures is the ministry put in place to repossess all the irregularly allocated pieces of government land and houses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Lands. The next one, which would have been asked by Honorable Member for Keses, Honorable Shwarup Misra, has been, will be placed in the next available opportunity because he has made a request which has been accepted. So let's go to the member, the nominated member, Honorable Gideon Keter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask the question number 301 of 2019 to the Cabinet Secretary of Industry, Trade and Cooperation. That first, is the Cabinet Secretary aware that the pre-export verification of conformity program, a process of quality inspection of imports to ensure the safety and quality of goods imported into Kenya, is currently dominated by foreign inspection agents appointed by KEBS to carry out this inspection? Second, could the Cabinet Secretary state why most of the approved inspection agents are based in countries that most goods imported into Kenya originate from? And third is, what measures the ministry is taking to ensure local agents are engaged in this program, PVOC program, and further build local capacity to undertake inspection? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That one will be replied to before the Departmental Committee on Trade, Industry and Cooperatives. That is the last one. So we'll move to the next order.
Order number 8, procedural motion. Exemption of business from the provisions of Standing Order 40, paragraph 3.
Leader of Majority Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this House orders the business appearing under Order number 12 in the order paper be exempted from the provision of Standing Order 140, Standing Order 40, subsection 3, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or the minority, or business sponsored by a committee. Mr. Speaker, in the House Business Committee last night, and because if the House agrees with us, based on our calendar, the House will go for a short recess of 10 days. And we felt that the matter under Order number 12, which is the special motion, the mandate of the National Assembly within the bicameral setup of Parliament, is important, and we must deal with it today morning so that we can go home and ponder and allow the Senate, because they have done a similar motion. They have given their side of the story to the people of Kenya, so we will have an opportunity this morning to give our side of the story based on facts and evidence. So we felt that this morning we exempt the morning sitting from that order number. So it's a decision of the House Business, and I ask members to agree with us. And I'll ask as I move, I ask the Deputy Minority Leader who was in the House Business, and Honorable Junet who was there, and many others, to second.
Yes, just second, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of Majority almost confused me because he mentioned the Deputy Leader of Minority. I was looking, and my friend and brother here, I didn't see him in the House Business Committee. I was in the House Business Committee, so I will second, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, basically, as the Leader of Majority has mentioned, we are aware that this morning, Wednesday mornings, we usually deal with or transact business that come from what we would call private members or individual members, but we are requesting the House to agree with us to consider the motion that will be moved by the Leader of Majority, and of course, which has also my signature appended to it, so that we discuss the relationship between the two houses of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the Senate has already spoken to the country and the whole world on what they consider as interference with their work and their mandate and responsibilities and functions by the National Assembly. And I think it is just in order for this House also to pronounce itself and give our side of the story, as the Leader of Majority has mentioned. And so I request that the House agrees with us. I second.
Okay. And therefore, I propose a question, which is that these House orders that the business appearing as order number 12 in the order paper be exempted from provisions of Standing Order 43, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party, or business sponsored by a committee. I put the question, which is that these House orders that the business appearing as order number 12 in the order paper be exempted from provisions of Standing Order 43, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party, or business sponsored by a committee. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, the Law of Contract Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 1 of 2019, second reading. Question to be put.
I confirm that we have the required numbers, and therefore I proceed to put the question, which is that the Law of Contract Amendment Bill, National Assembly Bill number 1 of 2019, be now read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Yes.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the Law of Contract Act.
Okay, next order.
Order number 10, the Kenya Uwezo Fund Bill, National Assembly Bill number 42 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to provide for the establishment of the Empowerment Fund for youth, women, and persons with disabilities, to consolidate the Uwezo Fund, the Women Enterprise Fund, and the Youth Enterprise Development Fund into one fund and for connected purposes. Order number 11, the Equalization Fund Bill, National Assembly Bill number 43 of 2019, first reading. A bill for an act of parliament to operationalize Article 204 of the Constitution to establish structures of directly administering the Equalization Fund and for connected purposes.
Next order.
Order number 12, special motion, the mandate of the National Assembly within the bicameral setup of Parliament.
Order members, before we go to that particular order, I have a communication to make. Honorable members, before proceeding to consider the business indicated as order number 12 in today's order paper, I wish to draw to your attention, I wish to draw to the attention of the House provisions of Standing Order 87, which is content of speeches, specifically paragraph 3, 4, and 5. Honorable members, for avoidance of any doubt, paragraph 3, 4, and 5 of the Standing Order 87 provide as follows. 3, it shall be out of order to use offensive or insulting language, whether in respect of members of the House or other persons. 4, subsection 4, states as follows. No member shall impute improper motive to any other member or to a senator, except upon a specific substantive motion of which at least 3 days' notice has been given, calling in question the conduct of that member or senator. Section 5 reads as follows. It shall be out of order for a member to criticize or call to question the proceedings in the Senate or the Speaker's ruling in the Senate, but any debate may be allowed on structures and roles of Senate or Parliament. Honorable members, I therefore urge all of you to strictly abide by provisions of the said standing order while debating this particular motion. You must refrain from using unparliamentary language and imputing improper motive to any senator or member of Parliament. I will not allow any members to criticize or discuss any individual senator. Members are allowed, however, to converse on establishment, mandate of the Houses of Parliament, structure, role, and functions of Parliament as set in the Constitution or in any other legislation as set out in terms of the motion before the House. The House is therefore accordingly guided. I thank you. What is your point of order, the Leader of Majority Party?
Mr. Speaker, we are guided by your communication, but Mr. Speaker, I think your statement contradicts the tenets of the Chamber of Parliament, where members enjoy free speech and conscience. Yes, we know our boundaries, but I think if we read that statement, then we are going back to the dark days of Kanu. So, Chair, can you clarify that your statement is not taking back the country to the days before the multi-party era? Because well, we have got free conscience. The only place a member of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, can enjoy free conscience, can discuss anything, it is the chamber.
Yes.
But now, unless we withdraw this motion, the way you have stated it is like people are scared now. Honorable Junet has serious issues on leadership.
Leader of Majority Party, I have confirmed beyond doubt from the Minister of Energy that we will not have any darkness in the House. And from the House leadership, it is confirmed also that we have a backup, so we will not go to any dark day. Now, but in terms of what I've just read, I'm merely restating the standing orders. So, honorable members, you feel free to debate very robustly indeed, but let's abide by the standing orders. Nobody will be gagged, and I have said debate robustly as is possible. That one is allowed. What is not going to be allowed is what the standing orders, of course, has guided us not to, to infringe. So, honorable members, you should not feel gagged at all. In fact, I can assure you, you will be as free as is possible to discuss and canvass this motion. So that should not be a worry to any member. So, Honorable Leader of Majority, will start with you to move the motion as robustly as you can.
Chair, first you allow me to move this motion in an amended form in page 67 at the subtitle, cognizant that the matter of whether the question as to whether a bill concerns counties could routinely arise has been addressed by the High Court of Kenya in the matter of Nation Media Group Limited and 6 others, but the Attorney General and 9 others, judicial review, Mrs. Application number 30 of 2014, where the court held that the requirement contained in Article 110.3 comes into play when there is a question or doubt as to whether or not a bill concerns counties, and I want to add the following words after counties, where the demarcation of funding between the national and county government are clear. Having said that amended, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the motion in terms of what has been set out in the order paper, but allow me to read the resolutions from page
correct.
1000.
Yes, correct. And for members' information,
1007.
What the Leader of Majority has done is skipped the entire, because it's very long.
Yes.
So, honorable members, you can read through it is in the order paper, so he's proceeding to the resolutions.
Yes, now therefore this House reiterates and reaffirms its commitment to respect, uphold, and defend the Constitution in terms of Article 3 of the Constitution. 2, further reiterates and reaffirms the exclusive role of the Speaker of the National Assembly and the relevant committee of the House in the consideration of any motion that makes provisions for matter listed in the definition of a money bill under Article 114 of the Constitution. 3, further reiterates and reaffirms its oversight role over the national revenue and its expenditure, including lawful and effective use of public funds by all state organs. Number 4, urges the Speaker to continue engaging the Speaker of the Senate on establishing the appropriate framework for jointly resolving any question as to whether a bill concerns county government as and when such a question arises. Number 5, reaffirms that pursuant to the provision of Article 94, 4, and 5 of the Constitution, the mandate of oversight of state organs exclusively vests in the National Assembly, and the duplication of the role in the Senate is unconstitutional. 6, resolves that the House continue upholding the provisions of Article 1093 in the passage of bills that do not concern county governments. That B, the House continues upholding the provision of Article 1095 and Article 114 of the Constitution and Standing Order 143 in considering bills originating from the Senate. That in the first instance, the House of Parliament always explore alternative mechanism in resolving any dispute that may arise between the houses from time to time, as is a practice in comparative jurisdiction. That in the event of a failure of the alternative dispute resolution and mechanism, the National Assembly institutes legal proceedings to seek interpretation of the Constitution with respect to the foregoing concerns and also with respect to the scope of its mandate vis-à-vis that of the Senate, including whether it is lawful for the Senate to continue duplicating in entirety the National Assembly legislative, representative, and oversight mandate and its organizational and institutional structures with the resultant pressure on public resources. And 2, the enforcement of Article 108 on party leadership, 121 on quorum, and 122 voting in Parliament of the Constitution with regard to the operations of the Senate. And finally, that in the meantime, the House Business Committee, upon this resolution, inquires into the foregoing concerns and present a report to the House as soon as it's practicable. That is a motion, Mr. Speaker, and its resolution. And Mr. Speaker, allow me to state before we got here today, we really restrained ourselves from acting and giving time to our colleagues in the Senate, since we were still, and is still a baby, the Senate is still a baby, of learning how to walk, how to appreciate, how to understand, and familiarize itself with its new functions. We have now said, Mr. Speaker, we cannot wait anymore for the baby to walk forever. This baby must stand, and we must teach the baby how to walk. We must teach the baby how to eat solid food. The baby cannot drink milk forever, Mr. Speaker. We must teach the baby where to walk, and we must teach the baby its boundaries. Mr. Speaker, if we don't do this, I am afraid the traction for the abolishment of the Senate will gather momentum, and soon we will have no baby to talk about. So, Speaker, history repeats itself. 1963 Senate was once a house in the history of this country. Our Senate needs to be sober. We need to be sober up. Kenyans are getting tired of using their taxes to finance the operation of a moribund house. The Speaker, the last straw came for us, especially with myself and the leader of minority, when we have been appointed by this House to represent the National Assembly in 5 mediation committees. What we saw was horror. What we experienced, if replayed, could cause anger. Worse still, if what we experienced was to be played on national television, Kenyans could weep. It's a house that has no interest for Kenyans in its heart. It's a house that flourishes in flouting the Constitution. It's a house that thrives when there is an impasse, like mediation. It thrives very well when there's an impasse in a matter. And I dare say, it's a house that smiles when bills fail. If you think it is a joke, why could a bill like the roads bill, a critical bill for defining standards for both the national trunk and the county roads fail? That is a question we must ask ourselves. Why should a bill like the division of revenue that is important to the county governments fail? Mr. Speaker, it's very unfortunate that this House has sat and watched helplessly as the Senate wallows into oblivion of unconstitutionalism. Why do I say so, Mr. Speaker? How can the Senate purport to represent counties and protect devolution when it focuses on passing legislation, passing laws that seeks to promote the interests of county governments in accordance with its mandate? Mr. Speaker, how can the Senate purport to say that it seeks and affirms and protects and defends the Constitution when it is constantly offending the provisions of Article 96, Article 109, and Article 110 of the Constitution? And Mr. Speaker, Article 96 is very, very, very clear, because we really want to educate the Senate and the people of Kenya. We have no mischievous tendencies. We have no anything. We want to tell the country what 96. And I'm sure lawyers and experts, including the committee of experts, must be watching this deliberation. 96 says the Senate represents counties and serves to protect the interests of the counties and their governments. It's very, very clear, black and white, both in spirit and the letter of the Constitution. Article 109, Mr. Speaker, says it for record purposes. Parliament shall exercise its legislative power through bills passed by Parliament and assented to by law. In 2, it says any bill may originate in the National Assembly. Any bill. So this House has a blanket check. Any bill under the sun can originate from the National Assembly. 3 says a bill not concerning county government is considered only in the National Assembly. So any bill that does not concern county governments can only be discussed in the National Assembly and passed in accordance with Article 122 and the Standing Order of the National Assembly. Number 4, it says a bill concerning county governments may originate in the National Assembly. So even we have powers to originate bills that concerns county governments, including even a member of this House can bring a bill concerning ECD. Yeah, they can. So the chairman of KUPPET, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity, and the Secretary of NAT, that you have an opportunity to discuss ECD and bring a bill. But the senators have no powers to bring a bill on the other sections of the education sector: primary, secondary, universities, tertiary. And it says, Mr. Speaker, further, that a bill may be introduced by any member or committee of the relevant houses of parliament, but a money bill may only be introduced only in the National Assembly in accordance with Article 114. That if they have a bill that concerns its money bill, where the Minister for National Treasury must have an input, then that bill, before publication or before the House decides the National Assembly, it must be sent to the relevant committee, which is the Committee on Budget and Appropriation. Finally, 110, which is very critical. In this Constitution, it says a bill concerning county government means all that. So they are doing legislation when they are violating Article 96, Article 109, and Article 110 of the Constitution on the legislative process, including through the origination of money bills. And I have records which I can table, Mr. Speaker, if the House allows me. Mr. Speaker, secondly, how can the Senate purport to protect counties through ensuring adequate funding when at the same time they are rejecting the procedure of checking on public expenditure through Article 114 of the Constitution, through the Public Finance Management Act, and through the Standing Order 143 on how money bills are supposed to be processed? Speaker, how can the Senate, in full hypocrisy, have standing orders implementing Article 114, yet challenge Article 114 without implementing its own rules. That they have amended their own standing orders, that they can deal with the money bills. But in the Constitution, Article 114, 110, 109 are very clear on where money bills must originate and which house has the jurisdiction. So, Mr. Speaker, and on this one is not only shameful, but we can call it is out of the two insincerity that the Senate treats us. The Speaker, how can the Senate say the procedure of considering Senate bills as contemplated in Standing Order 143 are meant to kill, yet our Budget and Appropriation Committee has approved over 10 bills from the Senate, which had no money bill effect, and 7 of them have been passed by this House and assented to by the President. Mr. Speaker, what am I about to say is that even more shameful, how can the Senate, as alleged defender of the Constitution, allow just 2 senators to start the sitting House proceedings without observing the quorum? Because if you look at the Senate this afternoon, when the Speaker walks at 2:30, you will find 2 senators, 3 senators, 4 senators, when the Constitution says the quorum of the Senate is 15 members. So which means all the laws they have passed, all the motions they have passed are illegal. Because if you don't reach the quorum, you can't start the business of the House. So Speaker, I am sure the answer will, you'll find 2 senators and the Speaker starting. It's never seen in any other jurisdiction. It's never seen in other jurisdiction. I don't know where the other 65 senators are. Mr. Speaker, you will be shocked that there are usually 64 senators when the Senate is deliberating on interests of counties. It appears, and that is why you see when bills stuck there for over 2 years, because the quorum issue is a matter of great concern. And we had to postpone several meetings, myself and the leader of minority, in the mediation meetings, where there were 5 senators. We used to postpone meetings because an Honorable TJ, I hope he's here, we could not get the quorum. So 5 members we couldn't raise, our 5 members were usually there. So Speaker, I am even told that every senator...
Order, Honorable Wanga. What are you doing behind there? You know, this House is for specific purposes, not one that I've just seen you do. Proceed, Leader.
Honorable Speaker, I am even told that every senator is a chair or a vice chair of a committee, and they have over 20 committees. You can imagine 67 members, each one of them is a chair and a vice chair, and they have 20 committees. So Speaker, we need to ask ourselves, what is the relevance of the Committee of Defense and Foreign Relations in the Senate? What is the relevance? What is the relevance of the Committee of National Security? Speaker, tell me that aspect of national security which is devolved in counties. Tell me, why should the Minister for Foreign Affairs appear before the Senate? Why should the Minister for Interior appear before the Senate? And I want to thank Honorable Matiang'i. He sent an advisory, seeking advisory opinion to the Attorney General, which the Attorney General has not replied till today. Why should the Minister for Energy go to the Senate to discuss Kenya Pipeline? If you read the 4th schedule of the Constitution, Kenya Pipeline is under the national government. So why should the chair of energy invite Munyes? And I think the Energy Committee of this House must call the Minister for Petroleum and ask him, under what constitutional jurisdiction did you appear before the Senate? And if he has no good answer, that is a process for impeachment. Yes. That when Professor Magoha goes to the Senate, he can only answer questions concerning ECD. He should be very clear. If they call him to any other thing, we are telling him he must defy. And these public and state officers, we must tell them, The Senate has no powers to impeach you. The Senate has no powers to remove you from office. So even if they indict you, they threaten you, the only house that has the powers under the Constitution to vet and to remove state officers is the National Assembly. So even if you are threatened and you are a minister, they cannot remove you. Even if you want to remove the president or the deputy president, the process must be initiated from his house. So we must call a spade a spade. This Constitution and the framework of the Constitution had an intention why they did that. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine how much allowances Kenyans pay to have every senator as a chair or a vice chair of a committee? I leave this to the budget officers, but the reality of the real cost could bring tears to every eyes of Kenyans. Honorable Speaker, finally, it's time we also set the record straight on the role of the Senate in vetting state officers. The Constitution in Article 132, Mr. Speaker, 132, and I want to read for the senators and for the people of Kenya. 132 says, Mr. Speaker, the President shall nominate and with the approval of the National Assembly, appoint and may dismiss. So the powers to appoint, the power to nominate lies with the President. The power to appoint and vet in Article 132(4) lies with the Article 132(2) lies with the National Assembly. Constitutional office holders, the Director of Intelligence, the Cabinet Secretary, the Principal Secretaries. So we wonder, and we ask ourselves, it's very clear and it's within the exclusive jurisdiction of this House, but then we wonder, how did the Senate get to vet the Inspector General of Police? The only thing was because it had a place-written parliament. They want to read the Constitution in a very selective way. That anywhere written parliament means both houses. And we have no problem. But when we are doing the mediation, and today you'll see in the report of the Land Index and the Irrigation Bill, anywhere written parliament now they have changed. They have said we must write National Assembly and Senate. Yes, and you vet the IG, but again you have no powers to appropriate his money. You have no powers to oversight him. You have no powers even to remove him. So, Mr. Speaker, there is confusion, and this baby has crawled for too long. We can't feed this baby with milk forever. This baby must be told how to eat solid food, how to swallow, how to walk, and walk within its boundaries. The baby cannot walk in the prison of parliament the way the baby wants. This baby must be secluded to its jurisdiction. And if they have not gone to school, we need to take this baby to a school. And not baby class, you can take him to even university. Mr. Speaker, I will go on and go on. There are some of the issues that this House must be guided. The Constitution is very clear on our different roles, how the Senate has blindly followed on their own mandate in terms of the Constitution. This must stop, Mr. Speaker, and I'm saying this so because you are aware, Mr. Speaker, that this motion has nothing to do with this House. We are seeking to protect the gains that this House has achieved on behalf of the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, if the Senate makes good its threat, because now they have got 17 bills, they are saying we pass them unconstitutionally. If the Senate makes good its threat and goes to court to challenge the laws that we have passed at this House in accordance with the Constitution, Speaker, I want Kenyans to know that the Senate will have stood against the interests of Kenya as emphasized in our various laws. And we want to tell Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, to know that the Senate will have sought to destroy that which Kenyans regard as being for the economic development of our country. And Mr. Speaker, for this reason, as I conclude, allow me to say that I do not recognize that if only the Senate can stick to its mandate in Article 96 of the Constitution, it can be of a great help to our counties. They could also have so much in their plate that they could need not to move around and, become a squatter on the functions, legislative functions of the National Assembly. What I'm therefore saying, Mr. Speaker, is that we explore alternative dispute resolution mechanism between the two houses. But if that fails, then we have no option, but we are going to court. And Mr. Speaker, at the end of this motion, you have seen the House Business Committee have been asked to turn itself into a committee under the Speaker, interrogate this matter, and bring a report to this House. So we will call. Mr. Speaker, I saw the DPP and the DCI and EACC appearing before the Senate every day. Mr. Speaker, the only committee since I joined Parliament in the 10th Parliament that deals with those institutions is the JLAC, is the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. They vet them, they appropriate their money, they report to them quarterly. So, Mr. Speaker, and they cannot remove the CEO of EACC is approved by this House. The DCI, we gave him 7.9 billion. Mr. Speaker, there is a lot of wastage of time by public servants. And a number of times, even the President and the national government complained why his ministers and state officers have spent more time within the prison of Parliament. If we have our own respective jurisdiction, that those who are supposed to be oversighted by the National Assembly come to the National Assembly. And we leave the Senate to deal with the governors and the CECs for finance and environment. Then government will not spend more time in the House. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure members will talk about it. In fact, in the Constitution, it says the Senate participates in lawmaking. But it says the National Assembly enacts legislation. There's a difference between participating and enacting. So enacting is us. Participation is there. So participation can even be public participation. Mr. Speaker, the other thing that is very expensive is that a bill starts from this House, goes through public participation, then when it goes to the Senate or vis-a-vis, the same House wants to conduct a fresh public participation. When we have got the Hansard, because the people we are giving the participation role are the same people of Kenya. So you see there's a different participation report from the Senate, another different participation report. So we are confusing the people of Kenya, and that's why we felt that committee will call respective ministers. And we are warning ministers. Today I want to send warning to ministers who have no business in the Senate. If you go to the Senate, the relevant committee of this House will call you and you will tell us under what provision of the law you have been there. And if you have no serious answer, then we are going to impeach you. Because one of the reasons why you impeach a state officer is if he violates the Constitution. So Monica Juma, C.S. Matiangi, Rachel Omamo, when you enter the prison of Parliament, your domain is the National Assembly and its committees. Because you have no county function. Professor Magoha, please go to the Senate on only ECD matters. If they ask you any other question outside it, you say, that is not your jurisdiction. You have no functions, you have no constitutional backing to ask me that question. Speaker, even at times I saw, there was a bill on potato by the former senator for Nyandarua. That bill should have been in the county assembly of Nyandarua. If you want to regulate camel meat, you do it in the county assembly of Garissa, Wajir, Samburu. You don't bring it to the Senate. But you'll find some things of the county assemblies being brought to the Senate and then here. Finally, Mr. Speaker, the division of revenue bill, and my colleagues who are experts on budget will talk about it. The division of revenue bill is an exclusive bill for this House. and the Supreme Court erred in its division, in its opinion. We want to say it. It was populist. And if you read the dissenting opinion of Judge Njoki Ndungu, that was the right decision. The rest was populist. And we want to say that the Division of Revenue Bill going forward must be the bill that will be dealt with. And that's why today we are in a quagmire. The whole budget is a domain of the National Assembly. The Minister for National Treasury can only appear, Honorable Rotich, and you must hear me, he can only appear in the Senate when he's dealing with the county revenue of allocation. And maybe when he gives them the budget policy statement. I beg to move and ask Honorable Bandi, the leader of minority, to second. And I think I lived by your guidance.
You did. You are robust in your transacting this business, and you did not invade anybody's standing orders. Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Kenya as a nation in 2010 decided to give itself a bicameral parliament. And Mr. Speaker, Parliament of Kenya is established under Article 93 of the Constitution, and we only have one parliament in Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Under Article 93 of the Constitution, it says that there is established a Parliament of Kenya which shall consist of the National Assembly and the Senate. The Parliament of Kenya is one, but has two houses. It is a bicameral system of government. But, Mr. Speaker, the same Constitution has decided to give the two houses distinct roles, roles that are specific, roles that are very clear. Mr. Speaker, it was not the desire of the people of Kenya to have the two houses to duplicate their roles. And that is why under Article 93(2), it says that the National Assembly and the Senate shall perform their respective functions in accordance with this Constitution, meaning that the two houses are given distinctive functions to perform and deliver. And Mr. Speaker, there is history to having Senate in this country. We are aware that immediately after independence, Kenya gave itself bicameral system of government. The Senate then had a role of protecting the interests of the 7 regions and to protect minority communities which feared that they would be dominated by the majority communities. By then there were 2 dominant majority communities, the Kikuyu and the Luo communities. And the role of the Senate then was to protect the interests of other communities which were considered as minority communities. Mr. Speaker, the other role was to protect the 7 regions and their interests. But Mr. Speaker, because Senate veered from their responsibility and became weak, and also the attack from the KANU regime that time, and the failure by KADU to protect the Senate then, Kenya then again became a one-house parliament, a unicameral system of government. Mr. Speaker, then when it came 2010, the people of Kenya decided that we should have again 2 houses of parliament, the Senate and the National Assembly. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if you want to understand the relationship between these 2 houses, you need to get to the Hansard report first. You need to look at the Committee of Experts report, and 2, the Hansard report of the committee that's met in Naivasha, discussing and deliberating the relationship between the 2 houses. In fact, there was even a proposal by members of the committee, the parliamentary committee, which sat in Naivasha. And there are a number of members of parliament sitting in this house who are in that committee. I know of Honorable Milio Diambu, Honorable Kioni, we have Chachu Ganya, and Sophia. All of them were sitting in this committee. They even recommended that we should have Senate clearly defined as a lower house of parliament of its limited and specific functions. That came from that committee. In their minutes, the reason why they proposed that the Senate should be a lower house is because Senate has limited and specific functions. Those are 2 parameters, limited and specific. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, how come that was left out? It was left out because the Committee of Experts, which was chaired by Getonga, recommended that they gave advice that modern principles of constitution making do not support the creation of a hierarchy between the 2 houses of parliament. They were very clear that modern systems do not allow, or rather promote, that one house should be upper and another one is lower. I am saying this because you see our brothers who have ego problems in the Senate always want to call themselves upper house. Mr. Speaker, that is not in line with the modern systems of democracy and modern system of relationship between bicameral system, as was advised. Otherwise, the Senate would now be in the Constitution referred to as a lower house. Mr. Speaker, the people of Kenya decided, in their own wisdom, to define the functions of the two houses of parliament, clearly define them. And that is found under Article 95 and 96 of the Constitution. What is the responsibility of a member of parliament, or what is the responsibility or function of a parliament? Anywhere in the world, parliaments have three functions. One is representation, another one is oversight, and legislation. Mr. Speaker, the people of Kenya decided to distinguish the functions of our two houses in line with the three functions. If you go to representation, what did the people of Kenya give the National Assembly as representative role or representation role? The people of Kenya said that the National Assembly represents the people of the constituencies and special interest in the National Assembly. That the National Assembly deliberates on and resolves issues of concern to the people. What of the Senate? What did the people of Kenya, through this constitution, give the Senate? It says the Senate represents the counties and serves to protect the interests of the counties and their governments. Mr. Speaker, that is very clear. That is the representation role that the people of Kenya decided to allocate to each house of the parliament. Mr. Speaker, the other function that has been again distributed or allocated to the two houses by the people of Kenya is that of oversight. And Mr. Speaker, then what is the oversight role that is given to the National Assembly? Mr. Speaker, this is the role. The National Assembly determines the allocation of national revenue between the levels of government as provided in Part 4 of Chapter 12. The role of Parliament, National Assembly, is to divide revenue between levels of government. That is vertical division of revenue, national and counties. That is the role that is given to the National Assembly. And it goes ahead to say that National Assembly shall appropriate funds for expenditure by the national government and other national state organs. So any expenditure, any money that will be spent by national government or any national government entity or state organ is appropriated by National Assembly and exclusively so. C, the National Assembly exercises oversight over national revenue and its expenditure. So oversight over national revenue is exercised by the National Assembly. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the final work or job of the National Assembly in terms of oversight is to review the conduct in office of the President. The house that reviews the conduct in office of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta is National Assembly. The Deputy President, William Ruto, is a National Assembly. And any other state officers. And initiate, and that is very important, initiate the process of removing them from office. So the house that reviews the conduct of any state officer who is in office and initiates the process of removing them is, in fact, including senators, because Senate is defined as a state office. It is the National Assembly that can initiate that process. Then what is the role of the Senate? Mr. Speaker, and the House should listen to this. The Senate determines the allocation of national revenue among counties, whereas National Assembly has a responsibility of dividing revenue between the two levels of government. The Senate, under Article 96, determines the allocation of national revenue among the counties, which is horizontal distribution of revenue or allocation of revenue, as provided in Article 217. And Article 217 talks about the formula of allocating resources to various counties. It is the work of the Senate to determine how much Kirinyaga should get, Lamu, Homa Bay, etc. And exercises oversight over national revenue allocated to the county government. They only exercise oversight over national revenue that we allocate to counties, not even locally generated revenue by counties. And by the way, the High Court has already pronounced itself that Senate cannot oversight locally generated revenues by counties. That is the exclusive mandate of the county assemblies. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to wind up the oversight role of the Senate by saying, by reading 96.4, that the Senate participates in the oversight of state officers by considering and determining any resolution. So there must be a resolution to remove the president or deputy president from office in accordance with Article 146. They cannot initiate the process of removing president or deputy president. They only review, they only review and consider a resolution that has been passed by National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, that is the work of the Senate and the National Assembly as far as oversight is concerned. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in terms of the responsibility of the two houses, what is the role of the legislative role? How is it defined and allocated to the two houses? Mr. Speaker, under Article 95, again, the National Assembly enacts legislation in accordance with Part 4 of this chapter. Enacts legislation. But the Senate, I want to repeat that the National Assembly enacts legislation in accordance with Part 4 of this chapter. But the Senate participates in the lawmaking function of Parliament by considering, and it's not just participating, you have to read it up to the end, participates by considering, debating, and approving bills concerning counties. So that is where you end. They are only participating in bills concerning counties. And Mr. Speaker, that to me is so clear. And Mr. Speaker, then the question which the Senate has been asking and which they want to take to court is that they don't understand what it means by bills concerning counties. And Mr. Speaker, the question is it true that it is not clear what the bills concerning counties are? The answer is no. The bills concerning counties are clearly defined in the Constitution. And by the way, under Article 110, it is not just bills concerning counties. It says bills concerning county government. And Mr. Speaker, these are the bills that concern county governments, that the Senate needs to participate in legislating those bills. In this Constitution, a bill concerning county government means A, a bill containing provisions affecting the functions and powers of the county governments set out in the 4th schedule to the Constitution. And Mr. Speaker, you just need to go to the 4th schedule and understand what are these roles, where the Senate should participate. Mr. Speaker, one of them is under agriculture, crop and animal husbandry, livestock sale yards, county abattoirs, plant and animal disease control, and fisheries. Mr. Speaker, when you go to county health, there is you have many of them, county health facilities, ambulances, you have veterinary services, you have cemeteries. Mr. Speaker, if you don't have cemetery in your place, it is for the Senate to answer. They need to find out why there is no cemetery. Funeral parlors, Mr. Speaker, and crematoria. And by the way, there's now an improved desire for this. We saw, with all the, may God rest his soul in peace, Brother Bob Colimo yesterday. So we need many of these because the demand is increasing. That is the work of the Senate. Refuse removal, refuse dumps, and solid waste disposal. Mr. Speaker, refuse removal, Mr. Speaker. Actually, a committee in the Senate in charge of refuse removal, garbage and solid waste disposal, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I cannot mention all of them. Museums, libraries, Mr. Speaker, animal control and welfare, including licensing of dogs and facilities for the accommodation, care, and burial of animals, Mr. Speaker. These are distinct, limited functions that are given to the Senate. Mr. Speaker, what I wanted to say is that the Constitution has clearly defined
what are the issues that concern counties, the functions and powers of county government that the Senate can legislate on. There is also a bill relating to the election of members of a county assembly or a county executive. That one is a bill concerning county. And finally, a bill referred in Chapter 12 affecting the finances of county government. This is where there has been a problem, Mr. Speaker. If you go to Chapter 12, there are two bills that deals with finances. There is the Division of Revenue Bill and the County Allocation of Revenue Bill. But in the Constitution, it says a bill. If the Constitution expected that both bills could be dealt with by the Senate, it would have said so, that the bills contained in Chapter 12. And that is why I have consistently said from 2013 that it is a mistake to have Division of Revenue Bill transacted in two houses. Because, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the County Allocation of Revenue Bill, it is very clear, Mr. Speaker. It is clear that the County Allocation of Revenue Bill, we can only override the Senate by supermajority. How can you just leave an important bill like Division of Revenue Bill for the mediation of two houses? Mr. Speaker, there was a mistake there, and I continue to believe that that was a mistake. So, Mr. Speaker, the question that the Senate has been talking about is whether, Mr. Speaker, I hope you'll add me 5 minutes. Mr. Speaker, what the Senate has been questioning is whether the Speaker has been right in having some bills transacted only in the National Assembly. If a question does not arise as to whether a bill concerns counties, the people of Kenya did not expect that every time Honorable Kimunya generates a bill, Honorable Chachuganya generates a bill, the two speakers have to sit. Okay. That would be wasted of time, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, the High Court in 2014 made that determination. Mr. Speaker, just allow me to say the last bit about money bills, because that is my area, Mr. Speaker. If you could add me 2 minutes, I would deal with it. Mr. Speaker, Article 109 says all bills can be generated from National Assembly, but no money bill shall be generated from the Senate. The Senate has been asking, and they want to go to court, that what is a money bill? Surely, Mr. Speaker, this, you don't need to be an economist. You don't even need to be a finance expert. You don't need to be a lawyer. You just need to be literate and sober in your mind to understand that this is what the law and the Constitution says about money bill. In this Constitution, a money bill means a bill other than a bill specified under Article 218 that contains provision dealing with the following. 1, taxes, meaning taxation. 2, the imposition of charges on a public fund or the variation or repeal of any of those charges. C, the appropriation, receipt, custody, investment, or issue of public money. Finally, the raising or guaranteeing of any loan or its repayment. Mr. Speaker, why do you have to go to court? Why do you want to spend court's time to define for you what is clearly defined in the Constitution? You just need to ask my standard 3 girl, Mr. Speaker, to read for you what is under Article 114, understand and come to the House and deal with it. Mr. Speaker, I want to wind up by concluding that the problem where we are is that we have a Senate that wants to expand its territory beyond what is in the Constitution. In fact, senators are now behaving like bandits, Mr. Speaker. They are bandits attacking the responsibility and functions of the National Assembly, and we should call them as legislative bandits, Mr. Speaker, for what they are. Mr. Speaker, I second.
Okay, honorable members, before I propose a question, let me recognize in the galleries, both speaker and public and speaker's gallery, many schools that have come here to see the roles of Parliament and probably the Senate. These are Ngaru Primary School from Kirinyaga Central of Kirinyaga County, Kaharo Girls Secondary School from Maragua of Murang'a County, Ngaru Girls Secondary School from Kirinyaga Central, Kirinyaga County, Karangi Primary School from Gatanga in Murang'a County. All of them are in the Speaker's Gallery. And we have in the public gallery Thika Road Academy from Ruiru constituency of Kiambu County and Shama Spring Academy of Embakasi South of Nairobi County. Now, honorable members, I am going to only read the resolutions in terms of proposal because you must note that it is in an amended form. So I propose the question by just giving resolutions, that this House therefore resolves that the House continues upholding the provisions of Article 109.3 of the passage of bills that do not concern the county government. B, that the House continue upholding the provisions of Article 109.5 and 114 of the Constitution and Standing Order 143 in considering bill originating from the Senate. C, that in the first instance, the Houses of Parliament always explore alternative mechanism of resolving any dispute that may arise between the Houses from time to time, as is the practice in comparative jurisdictions. D, that in the event of failure of alternative dispute resolutions mechanism, the National Assembly institute legal proceeding to seek interpretation of Constitution with respect to the foregoing concerns, and also with respect to the scope of its mandate vis-a-vis that of the Senate, including Roman 1, whether it is lawful for the Senate to continue duplicating in entirety the National Assembly legislative, representative, and oversight mandates and its organizational and institutional structures, with resultant pressure on public resources. And Roman 2, the enforcement of Article 108, which is party leader, 121, which is quorum, 122, and 122, which is voting in Parliament, of the Constitution with regards to operation of the Senate, and E, that in the meantime, the House Business Committee, upon resolution, inquire into the foregoing concern and presents a report to this House as soon as is practically possible. What is your point of order, Honorable Manzo?
No, the motion has been moved. You can't reduce time. The motion has been moved. Standing order is allowed.
Don't.
I already done an intervention before.
No.
Let's hear Honorable Manzo, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you can see, the House is full. And Mr. Speaker, I'm moving that each member speaks 5 minutes instead of 10, if we could reduce it, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, honorable members, it's up to you to make the decision. So I will put the question. What Honorable Manzo is requesting the House to resolve is to reduce the time from 10 to 5, from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. And he says, probably rightly, that we have a lot of members requesting, and that is 29. That is the option that we have. You will make a resolution, or in the alternative, you agree as members that even if you are to go the 10 minutes way, you should be speaking for less. So I put the question. It's my business. I have no control. That the members contributing on this particular motion speak for 5 minutes. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contra opinion say nay? No, on this particular one, the nays have it, the nays. But even if the nays have it, it was very close, honorable members. What it therefore means is that there are 50% of members here who want to speak for 5 minutes, and another 50% want to speak for 10 minutes. So this is my request to members. You don't have to repeat each other. Speak for as few minutes as is possible so that the members, other members can have an opportunity. We'll start with Honorable Junet Mohammed. Honorable Junet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will try as best as possible to be brief, Mr. Speaker, so that other members can get a chance to speak. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the motion, Mr. Speaker, with a heavy heart, because it appears to me that, Mr. Speaker, the Second Senate of the Republic learned nothing, Mr. Speaker, from the First Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 1966, Mr. Speaker, just 3 years after independence, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans decided to do away with the Senate that existed at that moment, Mr. Speaker. That is one of the issues, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans identified at that point in time that they cannot live with, Mr. Speaker, the Senate, including illiteracy also, ignorance and poverty and disease. Mr. Speaker, the Senate was categorized at that time in that category, Mr. Speaker, that Kenyans said we cannot live with it, Mr. Speaker. It has to go, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bicameral Parliament, Mr. Speaker, failed, Mr. Speaker, at that time, Mr. Speaker. It has failed a second time now, Mr. Speaker, for the last 3 years, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am not, people might say this motion is out of sibling rivalry, or, Mr. Speaker, one house trying to push the other. It's not, Mr. Speaker. It is the supremacy of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. We are not siblings, Mr. Speaker. We are older than them because of the powers and functions that we have been given to us, Mr. Speaker, by the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. The other day, Mr. Speaker, I was in a committee, mediation committee. I saw a Senate member saying, this is the National Senate. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution only says the Senate. I've not seen what is the National Senate, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, since the inception of this Senate, Mr. Speaker, this Senate summons everyone and everybody without authority, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that culture and that amounts to impunity, Mr. Speaker. You cannot remodel the Constitution in accordance with your comfort. That if you want to do something, you manipulate the Constitution and summon anybody as you wish, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they say they are summoning everyone because of the word Parliament, Mr. Speaker. But the Constitution says with authority. You must have the authority conferred to you by the Constitution to summon anyone that you feel like summoning. But, Mr. Speaker, that was just my opening remarks. The issue that I wanted to bring to the attention of Parliament, of the House, Mr. Speaker, is this one, Mr. Speaker. The Constitution, Mr. Speaker, only recognizes one leader of the majority party and one leader of the minority party in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Honorable Speaker, under Article 1081, the Constitution expressly states, and I quote, there shall be a leader of the majority party and a leader of the minority party. The use of the singular reference cannot be interpreted in any way or stretched to accommodate any creative legislative imagination, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution says there is only one majority leader and there is only one minority leader, Mr. Speaker. These ones now who are masquerading in the corridors of the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, claiming to be leaders of majority and leaders of minority, Mr. Speaker, their mandate is based on what, Mr. Speaker? If the Constitution is saying we only have one leader, Mr. Speaker, of minority and one leader of majority, according to my understanding, Mr. Speaker, is that under Parliament we must have that leadership, and anybody who's a leader in the Senate must report to those leaderships, Mr. Speaker. The majority leader in the Senate must report to the majority leader in the National Assembly, and the minority leader in the Senate must report to the minority leader in the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker. That is the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Article 1082 and 3 goes ahead to specifically designate the person who the leaders in the National Assembly goes ahead to specifically designate the person who the leaders in the National Assembly of the largest party and the second largest party or coalition of parties, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it also gives privileges, Mr. Speaker. The standing order, because it is derived from the Constitution, gives privileges to those leaders, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is leadership in the House, in the other House, who are enjoying some privileges which are not enshrined in any law, Mr. Speaker. That Auditor General must examine and tell us where that voted is coming from, Mr. Speaker. Because you must account for every coin of the Kenyan people, Mr. Speaker. You can't just assign yourself and enjoy privileges which is based on any law, Mr. Speaker. And this has gone on for long, Mr. Speaker. Now, last 8 years now, Mr. Speaker. And then you are claiming here that the Division of Revenue Bill money should be increased to the counties when you are enjoying privileges which are not yours yourself, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you see, Mr. Speaker, when you are creating committees, Mr. Speaker, to oversight. You must create committees, Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the functions that you have. Relevant to the functions that has been given to you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you have Defense and Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate, Mr. Speaker. But there's Defense and Foreign Relations Committee in the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thought to the bare minimum, they must have committees that are in accordance with the function and the fourth schedule, Mr. Speaker. If the Senate's function is animal husbandry, Mr. Speaker, for example, as an example, which is in the Constitution, I'm not making it, they should have a standing committee on refuse collection and animal husbandry, Mr. Speaker. Why are you shying away? And that's a very important matter that this country requires. Our country is full of solid waste, Mr. Speaker. And you are feeling shy to form a committee on refuse collection, Mr. Speaker, and animal husbandry. You are feeling shy to create a committee for cemeteries and crematorium, Mr. Speaker. Why are you feeling shy? Those are services that Kenyans need, Mr. Speaker. I wish I was serving in the Senate. I would have been the chairman of refuse collection committee, Mr. Speaker, and garbage disposal. Honestly speaking, to clean up the city, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, you have to look the kind of suffering we go through the garbage collection in this country, Mr. Speaker. And then somebody is feeling shy to be the chairman of garbage collection committee in the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the Senate that this cannot go on, Mr. Speaker. This cannot be allowed to go on, Mr. Speaker. The Senate is claiming that they can summon anybody as per the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what business has the other members have put on got to do with other functions that have not been devolved? Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this matter must be put to rest. Because if we continue like this, Mr. Speaker, actually, one of the reasons why I support the constitutional amendments, Mr. Speaker, in this country, one of the reasons is the Senate, Mr. Speaker. My view is the Senate should be scrapped. It's my view. And nobody should bother me and harass me for it's my view. If you look at other developed democracies and jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker, the Senate is a club of membership of eminent persons, Mr. Speaker, who only sit quarterly. They sit 3 times a year. And they come up with a resolution that helps govern the country, Mr. Speaker. They are like advisors to the president, Mr. Speaker. Not this the Senate, which is running around here everywhere, claiming to be involved in everything. The other day they were investigating Kenya Airways, why Kenya Airways is collapsing. What county money is in Kenya Airways? They don't have even airstrips where Kenya Airways can land, Mr. Speaker. And you are investigating an airline which doesn't even fly to your county, Mr. Speaker. You're investigating the airstrip in Migori, only a small aircraft can land. And then Senator here is sitting saying investigating Kenya Airways, Mr. Speaker. Shame, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, not that we are trying to demean. Some of us might become senators one time, Mr. Speaker, but we must stick to our role as enshrined in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my last point is, these senators have said that they are going to court and take all the bills that were passed in this House to court, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what bills? People who participate in lawmaking, Mr. Speaker. And bills that have been enacted properly through this House. So, Mr. Speaker, my view, or my last shouting is that if the Parliamentary Service Commission does not stop paying emoluments, allowances to these masqueraders who are calling themselves leaders, Mr. Speaker, I will go to court also to stop it, Mr. Speaker. People masquerading, earning allowances for no work, for no positions that don't exist in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker.
Just, no, I don't want to increase your time because, members want to speak.
Mr. Speaker, the other day,
30 seconds.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, the other day, when houses were being demolished at Ngong by Kenya Railways, can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, a chairman of a Senate committee and his members went with 2 choppers. 3 senators, only 2 choppers, one for the chairman, and to go and look at how houses are being demolished, Mr. Speaker. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker? The other day, Mr. Speaker, Kenya National Highway Authority was constructing a road in Turkana. Can you imagine, Mr. Speaker, a committee of the Senate is there oversighting a function of national government, Mr. Speaker? This wastage must stop, Mr. Speaker, for heaven's sake. If they want us to increase more money to the counties, they must stop the wastage that they are doing every day, Mr. Speaker. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, Senate must be abolished. Thank you so much.
Honorable Amos Kimunya.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion and very concerned, obviously, that Kenyans, in their wisdom, created these two houses with the hope that the two will complement one another in lawmaking and add value to parliamentary process. But unfortunately, perhaps the intentions of some of the people who wanted the Senate to be created are emerging. When we were in Bomas and people started debating how many houses do we need, there was a whole group of people who said, can we create a nyumba ya wazee, a retirement house where people who finish their work in the National Assembly can then go and rest as they transit back into public life. And others wanted a superior house that will oversight the National Assembly because that function had been taken over by being removed from the president. But the people of Kenya, in their wisdom, decided to remove all those things and give some limited responsibilities to the Senate. And if you look at the Senate, you don't see the difference between the responsibilities being carried by the Senate than what was being carried by the Association of Local Government Association of Kenya, the ALGAC, which was basically to oversight and to protect the local governments. Part of their responsibility of oversight has been taken over by the Council of Governors, which also now protects the county governments through the framework of the County of Governors, the Council of Governors. Mr. Speaker, because of these limited roles that the Senate has been given, it is falling into the adage that an idle mind becomes the devil's workshop. They've started creating mischief because they have nothing else to do, including challenging the Appropriation Act that is basically saying how money in this country will be spread and used and is providing the fuel that basically runs this country. Senate has threatened to go to court, to go and challenge several laws, including the appropriation bill. Members, you need to ask yourself, what would happen if that challenge was to go through? You will all be out of here. There will be no money to pay you. There will be no doctor to be paid. The government would have to shut down. Even the Senate itself will not be flying those choppers because there will be no money to actually finance the activities. The whole country will be brought to a standstill. Are those people the ones who you have determined, who you have put the responsibility of protecting counties, doing what they are supposed to be doing, or basically trying to bring this country into a standstill? Mr. Speaker, like I said, this is all mischief, and I don't want to belabor the points made by other speakers. Honorable Unite has said very clearly, we envisaged a Senate that will be sitting at least, once a quarter or something. They deliberate on a few things. And if you look at their functions, under Article 217, once every 5 years, mark my words, once every 5 years, they will determine the formula. It's a function they do once every 5 years, right? And that is the main responsibility of Senate. Within their job, within 96, is to determine the allocation of money across the counties, which they do once every 5 years. Now, we did it for them as Parliament, as this House, in 2012. They did it again. Now, they are supposed to be doing the third time. After that, they have nothing else to do. Because once the formula has been determined, the rest is the horizontal allocation in accordance with that formula. It's an arithmetical exercise. It does not require Senate to sit down and determine and bring here. Anyone can do it from Treasury, from the CRA. Now, outside of the once in 5 years function, what else does this county, does this Senate do? It's supposed to be protecting the counties. But, Mr. Speaker, as we are doing this, we also created the county assemblies. Who do the governors account to? Who approves the budgets of the counties? It's never the Senate, it's the county assemblies. So I don't even know why, when you see the Senate summoning governors to come and account to them, I don't even know where they're getting that power from. Because if you're not responsible for approving the budget for somebody, how are you then going to tell them to render an account to yourself, right? But they're extending their mandates because obviously they don't have enough work, right? Mr. Speaker, I said, just me add a bit of voice on this 96. Our roles are very clear. 95.4A basically says the vertical division of revenue will be by the National Assembly. And it's very clear and does not say by Parliament, by the National Assembly. The horizontal, which is once in 5 years, by determining that formula, will be determined by the Senate for approval by the National Assembly. They actually don't even approve that formula. They determine, then bring it here for us to approve, right? But when they now come and start saying they have a role in the division of revenue bill, and because it has not been done in the way they want, because they would want more than the 35% that has been allocated, yet the Constitution clearly states that the revenue going to the counties shall be a minimum of 15%. Currently, we are talking of 35%, if my calculation is right. And they are still saying it's not enough, right? Now, instead of the Senate working together with the county government to generate more revenue at the county level, which they can do by increasing the revenue by another 10%, which will be about 31 billion, then instead of doing that, all they are after is trying to increase the taxation levels on every Kenyan. Because where do we get the money, the extra money that's required to pay for the money they're demanding for the counties? We would be talking of increasing VAT. We will be talking of increasing taxes. We will be talking of telling Mwananchi, you must pay more so that money can go to the governors. And we don't even know what the trillions that have already gone are doing. So, Mr. Speaker, it's very important that we relook at the whole architecture of our parliamentary system. And I wouldn't want to exactly state, as Junet would say, that we kill the Senate, but perhaps we need to redefine their responsibilities. We need to redefine when they meet. You know, even including when they are meeting, being 2, 3 of them outside the quorum requirements, which they tried in 2013, it didn't work, they couldn't raise quorum, so they changed their standing orders or their working mechanisms so that they can actually meet without meeting the minimum threshold of 15 members. Now, that kind of house, we need to look at it. Perhaps it has some relevance, perhaps it doesn't have. Perhaps we should recreate an ALGAC. Perhaps we should give a role to the Council of Governors to protect the counties. Perhaps we should even create a devolution committee in this house, which will then oversee the counties and protect the counties, because we all come from counties, and none of us would want to see our county dying. So I don't even know what they protect that we can't protect. Mr. Speaker, I believe that's the kind of things we need to do to redefine those relationships. And if there's ever going to be a constitutional amendment, the first amendment should be to 94, 95, and 96, to redefine these relationships and either give the Senate more tangible work to do, or remove them altogether, or make them a committee of this House, which can then meet and work in terms of protecting devolution without necessarily having to duplicate the roles we have. Mr. Speaker, in the absence of time, I really don't want to belabor the point, but I would want to urge that we pass this motion so that the House Business Committee can go for public participation, invite all these experts, invite people who have a thing to say, and we can enrich this debate and report back to this House in terms of a very tangible report saying what is the relationship between these two houses. And obviously, if all else fails, I support. We should all go to court and also get an interpretation. But in the meantime, I would like to urge, and I'm not directing the courts, that if somebody was to appear before court to seek a stoppage of the Appropriation Act, even the courts will know. I don't even know at what point they'll be able to offer the judgment because they will not have money themselves to even.
Shall we now have Honorable Bui Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Speaker, for this opportunity. Also, the opportunity for a right to reply, because Senate spent time discussing the National Assembly on matters that are extremely sensitive. Speaker, I want to say that Kenyans were wise, of course, in bringing back the Senate in 2010. But looking at the scoreboards that we've been having between these two houses, it's clear that there must be some serious misinterpretation of the roles that each of us has. And since the 11th Parliament, Mr. Speaker, we've been actually having a fight of supremacy. And I would imagine that most of the times our senators believe that they should be supreme or maybe have more roles because of the geographical regions that they cover. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, they do not read the Constitution, which is what defines the roles of the National Assembly and the roles of the Senate. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of misinterpretation that I have noticed, and most of the time it comes from the definition of the word parliament, which of course we've agreed is a bicameral. That means we have the Senate and the National Assembly. But you see, by the time the Constitution was being promulgated, we had come from a single house. And that meant that any reference to the word parliament at that time was actually talking about the National Assembly. And I think that is why you see gaps in the Constitution whenever there's reference to parliament, when actually the actual requirement or the actual intention is to talk about the National Assembly. And those little loopholes are the ones that the Senate has consistently used to ensure that they stifle our work and ensure that our work becomes very difficult. Mr. Speaker, this house, the Senate, is actually a copycat house. And I want to say this because, you see, the Constitution gives us oversight over state organs and state officers. And it doesn't give them that role, but you see them attempting to do that. It gives us the management of money bills, and you see them attempting to pass or to bring forth money bills. It gives us a leadership structure that is in the Constitution. And like my whipper said, you see them attempting to also copy and initiate also leadership as per the National Assembly's whatever rights on and whatever systems in the Constitution. So, Mr. Speaker, I think going forward, if we were to do a referendum, I would even propose that the Senate actually becomes a committee in the National Assembly, because the National Assembly can carry out those roles which are defined in the Constitution very easily. But when you have a house that meets continuously and have made themselves actually full-time senators, then what it means is that the Constitution gives them very little work, and then they attempt to look for work, which they don't have. So they spend their time in the corridors looking at the bills coming to the National Assembly and salivating and wanting to participate in those bills. And that is where the problem is. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Senate has been attempting to amend the Statutory Instruments Act so that it allows them a role in the scrutiny of regulations and subsidiary legislation. Mr. Speaker, surely there is a committee on delegated legislation in this House, and it is that is the only committee that, as per law, should be able to deal with issues of subsidiary legislation. The Senate has absolutely no role to play in the consideration of subsidiary legislation. Now, a clear reading of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, bears this out. Article 95(3) of the Constitution grants the National Assembly a general power to enact legislation only limited in instances where it must concur with the Senate on bills concerning county governments and constitutional amendments. In contrast, Mr. Speaker, Article 96(2) of the Constitution expressly limits the legislative mandate of the Senate to participate in lawmaking by only considering, debating, and approving bills concerning county governments. I will not even bother going into those because my leader has gone through those very adequately. Mr. Speaker, At no point does the Constitution mention such a thing as subsidiary legislation concerning county governments. There is absolutely no such thing in law. There is absolutely no such thing in law, Mr. Speaker. And the Senate will have us believe that this subsidiary legislation made pursuant to powers granted in an act that was passed with the concurrence of the Senate should therefore be tabled in both houses for scrutiny. That is nothing further from the truth. Now, Mr. Speaker, ordinarily in considering an approval of the bills, any disagreement, Mr. Speaker, you are aware, is settled through mediation. And as such, it means that there is, of course, a possibility of the loss of a bill when the two houses fail to agree. So what is it that the Senate intends to happen when the two houses are at odds when considering legislative proposals for subsidiary legislation? Now, Mr. Speaker, I doubt that this constitution actually intended for the death of subsidiary legislation on account of disagreement between the two houses. Mr. Speaker, Article 94(6) of the Constitution requires an act of Parliament or legislation of a county which delegates the authority to make regulations to expressly specify, and this is important, Mr. Speaker, the purpose and objectives of the delegation of authority, the limits of the authority, the nature and scope of the regulations that may be made, and the principles and standards applicable to the regulations. As such, Mr. Speaker, once Parliament has passed a law, the distinction, whether it concerns county governments or not, is no longer applies. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that the Constitution has vested the oversight role of state officers and state organs on the National Assembly. And the Senate has only been allowed to exercise oversight of national revenue allocated only to the counties and participating in the impeachment of the president and the deputy president. So therefore, the general oversight powers covers both cabinet secretaries and any regulation body, regulation-making body. Therefore, supporting the view that any subsidiary, subordinate, or delegated legislation ought to be only scrutinized by the National Assembly. So, of course, Mr. Speaker, this is something that we have been going through. We have discussed it in the Committee on Delegated Legislation. And I think it's important, as we go forward, that we make this very, very clear, that it is only this House which has the power to oversee the regulations that come from our state organs, from our state officers, and not the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Top on the list on my right is Honorable Ore Sankok, David.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to inject my voice in support of this very important motion. Honorable Speaker, and as a country, we enacted a new constitution with a view of having a bicameral system of parliament. Honorable Speaker, but it seems that the lower house have failed in its mandate. Honorable Speaker, to bring you to speed to what they have done in the past, I think, 8 years, is that they have passed a few legislation or a few bills. That is the control of stray dogs bill, Senate Bill number 4 of 2019, the Street Vendors Protection Livelihood Bill, Senate Bill number 10 of 2019, the County Outdoor Advertising Control Bill, Senate Bill number 19 of 2018, the County Law Compliance and Enforcement Bill, the County Early Childhood Education Bill, Senate Bill number 26 of 2018. Honorable Speaker, clearly, this is a mandate that can be performed by county assembly, and even the county council, the former county council, were performing these duties very adequately, Honorable Speaker. And it is a clear indication that this is actually a lower house that have lacked mandate and have lacked job to do, and that is why they are straying into other territories that the Constitution does not give them. Honorable Speaker, why we had devolution is for us to have laws that are tailor-made to specific counties, Honorable Speaker. You cannot sit in Nairobi and legislate on the issue of camel milk, yet you are in Nairobi and camel milk is not, if you are a senator of Nairobi, it is not required in Nairobi. That legislation can be done well, effectively, in the county assemblies where camel milk and cow meat are found, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, Article 226(2) of the Constitution. The exercise of oversight, especially financial oversight, remain one of the key functions of county assemblies. This is particularly so with regard to the consideration of reports of the Auditor General on accounts of county government. During the first County Government Assembly of 2013 and 2017, these reports were originally submitted to the County Assembly. But later, it was changed that it is now submitted to the Senate because they do not have anything to do, so they had even to grab the powers that are vested upon the county assemblies to now Nairobi and to grab those powers. The Auditor General now table accounts of county governments in the Senate, which is contrary to our Constitution. We oversight as National Assembly the President and the Presidency. We oversight all cabinet secretaries. We oversight all national institutions. County assemblies oversight CECs. They oversight revenue that is collected within their counties. Now, where does the Senate sit? Where? Who do they oversight? If we oversight the national government and county assembly oversight the county government, where do we find the Senate? And that is why they have ended up having committees that are not necessarily theirs. In their ignominious narrative, they say the county assembly lack capacity than the Senate. But according to Article 193 and Article 99, the qualification of a senator is equal to the qualification, academic qualification of an MCA. Honorable Speaker, I don't think county assemblies with more than 1,800 members can lack capacity versus just 67 collection of senators that have the same qualification, academic qualification, as MCAs. Honorable Speaker, that is why they are forming committees that belong to this House. The Committee on Foreign Affairs. Where does the county assembly come in foreign affairs? Where does the county government come in foreign affairs? Honorable Speaker, the best counties, the best committees for them, and I will advise them: Stray Dogs Committee, Cemetery Committee, Dam Site Refusal Removal Committee, Artificial Insemination Committee, because I have heard about animal husbandry. Honorable Speaker, that is what they should actually have as committees. Honorable Speaker, therefore, the Senate, for lack of specific function, have strayed into the function of other level of parliament. That is the county assembly and the National Assembly. Honorable Speaker, surely, if Dr. Matiang'i appears in Senate or refuse to appear in Senate, will they impeach Dr. Matiang'i? Will they impeach Foreign Affairs Minister? They cannot even impeach. They don't have the powers to impeach even a chief. Even they cannot impeach those governors. The governors can be impeached by county assemblies, but not the Senate. And if you don't have powers to punish, how can you oversight? You only oversight an institution that you have powers to punish in case they don't go as per the law. Honorable Speaker, because I know everybody wants to talk, Honorable Speaker, in 1966, there was abolishment of the Senate. And I think Kenyans realized in that time that the Senate in Kenya does not work because it does not have any function. Honorable Speaker, I have been having a very hard stand on referendum. And today, I'll change my hard stand on referendum and support the referendum so that we can start by reviewing the conduct of Senate, and if possible, just like what happened in 1966, we abolish the Senate instead of having a referendum to create position to massage the ego of a few politicians. We can do this by reducing the wage bill and the burden Kenyans are bowing every day, because in this country, punda imechoka in court, waheshimiwa wamekuwa wengi kuliko raia. And we can start by abolishing Senate and the allowances they have been earning. Honorable Speaker, it is very funny that they go and oversight the roles of the National Assembly and go with two choppers, only 3 senators. Honorable Speaker, we are wasting public funds. And if Kenyans have to reduce the wage bill, and if Kenyans want services to be delivered to Kenyans, if Kenyans want roads, infrastructure, we can reduce this uncalled for wastage, including the wastage of giving yourself a position of majority leader in Senate, which is not anchored in the law. And Kenyans should know that a position of a majority leader or minority leader in the Senate that is not in law attract a lot of allowances, attract a lot of staff, attract chess cars, attract fuel guzzlers, Honorable Speaker, and this is where we are wasting public resources. And Kenyans should be told the truth. Where our resources are being wasted is where we have ghost workers who have no mandate. And ghost workers who have no mandate are in the Senate because county government are being oversight by county assemblies, and national government is being oversight by National Assembly. So what are they doing in essence? We have to redefine, and if there is any referendum, we redefine Senate, and in my opinion, we completely abolish Senate. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Opondo Karuma. Just to be sure that that is... yes, you may use the next.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to add my voice to this important motion. Mr. Speaker, this particular motion is taking our time this morning because the baby the people of Kenya created in 2010 in our constitution and named the Senate has refused to grow. And so we are now forced to, push the growth of this baby and bring some understanding to the reason as to why we had it. As Speaker, Kenya is a representative democracy. We are a republic. And Mr. Speaker, that is the reason as to why we are talking about the sovereign power belonging to the people in Article 1 of the Constitution. As Speaker, if you look at Article 93, after you look at sub-article 2 of Article 1, which says that the people can exercise that power directly or through their elected representatives, you then know where Parliament, comes in as the elected representatives of the people. Now, Speaker, Article 93 of the Constitution establishes the Parliament of Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, what sub-article 1 of Article 93 says is that there is one Parliament of Kenya with the 2 houses, National Assembly and the Senate. And Mr. Speaker, people take it for granted that the houses of Parliament have been so ordered by Article 93, sub-article 1. But it speaks to the seniority or superiority of these houses against each other. And that is why we were rejecting the debates going to the direction that we are siblings. These two houses are siblings. Mr. Speaker, if you look at Article 107, when there is a joint sitting of Parliament, the Speaker of National Assembly shall preside. And that is the language of the Constitution. It's very deliberate. Mr. Speaker, if you look at Article 146, Sub-Article 1B, when there is a vacancy in both the office of the President and the Deputy President, God forbid, the Speaker of National Assembly takes over as the President of the Republic. So that, Mr. Speaker, this debate we've been having about which is the upper house and which is the lower house is a moot debate. Mr. Speaker, as a House of Representatives, the law as common sense requires that there must be some number to begin business in either House of Parliament and to transact business, particularly when voting has to take place. Mr. Speaker, that is why in the Constitution at Article 121, you would question why we put that. Because you need a particular number of representatives to make a decision, to begin business, to transact business that binds the people of Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, this is why in Article 94, Sub-Article 4 of the Constitution, the law, which is the supreme law of the land, says that nobody, no entity, has the power to make provision having the force of law, but the Parliament of Kenya is properly established. Mr. Speaker, Article 121 of the Constitution clearly states that for us to transact business, the quorum must be 50 members of the National Assembly seated and 15 members for the Senate seated. And Mr. Speaker, just this morning, the whole nation noted when we came in due to our other representation roles, and the numbers were not up, a bell was being rung. That bell was being rung to remind all members of Parliament, despite the other roles they could be playing, engaging in on behalf of their people, to come, because there are decisions to be made here which would bind the people of Kenya. And then what our standing order, at standing order number 34, says that the bell will be rung for 10 minutes. If that quorum is not there, it will be rung again for 5 minutes. Mr. Speaker, there is a reason for that. That number has to be there for Parliament to be convened as Parliament. Mr. Speaker, a similar provision made pursuant to Article 124 in the Standing Order of the Senate says that for the Senate, it will also be so. What has our Senate done recently in their Standing Order? The Senate has deleted sub-article 2 or subsection 2 of their Standing Order 35, providing for quorum, to allow themselves to begin transacting business with even a single member. I mean, how do you do that when the Constitution at Article 121 has already said you cannot begin? And then, Mr. Speaker, watch in the afternoon when they begin business. Sometimes you see their speaker with one member. It becomes so idle that you see a speaker forcing that one member to speak. Honorable member, do you have something to say? Oh, Mr. Speaker, your face is looking very smooth today. Thank you for realizing I'm the only one in. I mean, that is not the Parliament we want. And Mr. Speaker, that quorum is not there because the Senate is busy plunging itself headlong into functions of National Assembly. Mr. Speaker, the other time we were in Philippines studying how they started their CDF regime when we had to revive ours following court decisions. And the consulate which came from Malaysia to meet us in Philippines is telling us it's being called by Senate members in Defense and Foreign Relations Committee. And Mr. Speaker, I'm urging members of this House to be firm. We told the consulate, you have no business meeting something called Defense and Foreign Relations Committee. Well, that's a function remitted to the national government. And I'm very happy the consulate officers, refuse to do so. And let us remind our state officers outside there that provided the provisions of Article 95, Sub-Article 5 remains, that it is in this House where we can initiate your removal, where we oversight you, including the President. Really, you have no business, going to that other House. We have a very big difficulty as we speak, Mr. Speaker, which I'll be speaking to later on concerning the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. where you are addressing an issue concerning Kenya School of Law and Council for Legal Education, some Senate Committee on Legal Affairs is already meeting the stakeholders. Yet the resolutions coming from there cannot be implemented at all. You are dealing with a matter as important to the presidency and the nation as corruption in national government, and you have the Senate, instead of meeting governors, is busy with the DCI, is busy with the Attorney General, is busy with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that if we do not put our feet down, the Senate in their current operations has ceased to be a House of Parliament, but has become an agent of confusion in parliamentary functioning and work. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Mbadi has taken us through the specific roles of the Senate. And Mr. Speaker, and the people of Kenya, if you look at the provisions of Article 93, sub-Article 2, it says there will be 2 houses of Parliament, but each of those houses will perform their specific functions. And Mr. Speaker, that is why the Constitution goes beyond the general provisions, picking the generality of the overall functions of the 2 houses in Article 94, to specifically now provide for the functions of the National Assembly in Article 95 and the separate and specific functions of the Senate in Article 96. Mr. Speaker, look at the wording of Article 95, sub-Article 1. What it says is that the National Assembly represents the people and special interests. So that my senator in Homa Bay should know that I represent everybody, including his parents, everybody, including him, everybody, including his children, his spouses, every relative. It is the business of Honorable Millie Odhiambo, Honorable Mbadi, Honorable Kaluma, and all members, including Honorable Wanga from Homa Bay, to make that representation. The Senate in Article 96, sub-Article 1, represents the county as an entity, as an institution. That is what they deal with, not the people in the county. And the wording of the Constitution is very clear. Mr. Speaker, this is the reason when you look at the building at the far end, you see the people of Kenya seated. It's the National Assembly, the Assembly of the nation here seated. The National Assembly, not the Senate. That other one is for the counties. Mr. Speaker, we oversight all state officers, including senators, if you look at Article 260. I wanted to urge Mr. Speaker, Speaker, do I request for only 2 minutes too? Yeah. Mr. Speaker.
What is, Honorable Shamala, what is out of
Speaker,
order?
sir, this morning it was resolved that members would get 10 minutes to speak. This top motion is generating a lot of interest, and really, in all fairness, I think members should be able to donate some of their time and not utilize all the 10 minutes. It is 10 to 12. If we're going to use 10 minutes, only 4 or 5 more members will be able to speak or contribute to this motion.
Very well.
Yes, it's 10 to 12.
Very
if
well.
we use 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, not more than 5 members are going to speak. Those are 7, okay, but not all of us.
Yeah, very well. Very well. Honorable Shamala, you know, earlier on, the members were asked to resolve whether they can reduce from 10 minutes to 5 minutes. Honorable Shamala, the House resolved that each member would take 10 minutes. But Honorable Shamala, there was a persuasive statement by the Speaker that if members would be kind enough maybe for another next member to speak, they may not necessarily need to take 10 minutes. They can take 5. But when a member is taking 10, there is nothing the Speaker would do. But the members are persuaded. Honorable Kaluma, I think your time is up, is it not? You have 30 seconds that Honorable Shamala took.
Honorable Samala intervene. Mr. Speaker, to summarize, I think the roles and functions of the various houses have been, elaborated on well by Honorable Mbadi and Honorable Duale. What I want to request for is that we undertake an audit of all laws the Senate has passed, beginning with a quorum of less than 15, following the amendment of their Standing Order 35-2. And we have them declared null and void. Mr. Speaker, as I end, could the people of Kenya, and I don't think this one requires a referendum, we can do it as Parliament. Let us convene, look at Article 255, The matters which go to referendum are only those matters concerning the structure of county government, not national government. I think the time has come, beyond our invoking the process of another arm of government called judiciary, to consider whether it is now necessary to obviate wastage of money. But
Very well, Honorable Opondo Kaluma. Before I give to the next person, allow me to recognize at the Speaker's Gallery 3 schools. One is Moganda Girls High School from Kieni constituency, Nyeri County. Next is South Teto Girls High School, Mukoroine constituency, Nyeri County. And that is Lodimito Girls High School, Dagoretti South constituency, Nairobi County. The 3 schools are welcome. Honorable Ichongwa.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I also rise to support this motion. And as I support this motion, Honorable Speaker, I think, Honorable Speaker, for those who have been with me from the 11th Parliament, I'm one of the members who have endeavored to avoid engaging in debates between ourselves and the other House, Honorable Speaker. But I think the other House, Honorable Speaker, has gotten to a point where they are not only rendering nugatory our Constitution, Honorable Speaker, but they are rubbishing that Constitution, misapplying it, and disparaging provisions of the Constitution, Honorable Speaker. And I really want to just dwell on the budget-making process, Honorable Speaker, because I have seen complaints from the Senate and even threats. And I just want to assume, Honorable Speaker, that they are just mere threats, that they do not have the intention of taking some of the bills that they have pretended to take to court. And particularly one of the bills that we passed in this House last week but one, and was assented to by the President last week, the Appropriations Bill, Honorable Speaker. Anybody purporting to take the Appropriations Bill to the courts, Honorable Speaker, to render it unconstitutional, is not only wishing death to Kenyans, but wants to bring this country to a standstill. And I think Honorable Kimunya has put it right. It will not just be them missing their own salaries and the allowances they need as they take chopper rides to Gong to view houses being demolished, like they enjoy seeing people's houses being demolished. Honorable Speaker, I've seen the same senators, and especially my senator from Kiambu, purporting, I think he chairs some committee on roads and infrastructure, where roads are extremely in a pathetic state in Kiambu County. I see my own senator going to inspect national government roads in Turkana County. And I ask myself, what did the people of Kiambu see in this man who has the time, the temerity, the audacity, and even, I do not even know if I voted for him, but I don't know why people would vote for somebody who, instead of oversighting money appropriated by county assemblies for fixing roads in Kiambu County, you are busy taking over the work of Honorable Kosing and the Committee of Roads of this Assembly, Honorable Speaker, purporting to go oversight roads in Turkana County, purporting to oversight some airport or some airstrip in Turkana, while roads in Kiambu County are in a pathetic state. The theft in Kiambu County is unrivaled. But all we do, Honorable Speaker, when we see the senators in their committee, their public accounts and something committee in the Senate, is a circus, Honorable Speaker, is a competition between senators and governors. They do not even dwell on issues that touch on matters to do with the counties, Honorable Speaker. And I remember when my own governor, the governor for Kiambu, appeared before that committee, they dwelt on non-issues to do with monies that have been appropriated to State House, instead of issues to do with what was called Sijui Pigana na Walevi in Kiambu, instead of issues to do with rehabilitation of roads, Honorable Speaker, in Kiambu County. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, let us not waste time, Honorable Speaker. There's nothing out of order, Honorable Speaker. I don't know what the Honorable Simba Arati.
Well, Honorable Ichongwa, you may not say that because when a member raises a point of order, you can't be too judgmental. Honorable Arati, what is it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is it in order that Honorable Ichung'wah, instead of discussing the issues of the Senate, he has turned the whole story against the only one senator of Kiambu? Now that he is discussing about Kiambu, nothing else, of the senator of Kiambu.
Honorable Ichung'wah.
Honorable Speaker, thank you. I think if the Honorable Simbarati had listened to my otherwise very good English, he would have known that I was giving that as an example. But I know he has a challenge with the language, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, I beg to continue. Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Ichung'wah. Honorable Ichung'wah. Honorable Arati, I'm not going to allow you to come back to the floor. But Honorable Ichung'wah, Honorable Arati is not way off the mark, because you remember there was a communication early in the morning. But I appreciate that you're giving it as an example. But in light of the Speaker's communication earlier, it's about the Senate, not about personalities within the Senate. And any other member within the National Assembly or the Senate.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Of standing order. But
and
please
indeed,
proceed.
I appreciate that you also appreciate that I was giving that just as an example to illustrate how the Senate has abdicated its role in oversighting the counties. Honorable Speaker, Article 109 of the Constitution is very clear, Honorable Speaker. And in fact, even before I go to 109, Article 94 and 95 of our Constitution is very clear that the Senate oversights the counties and the county governments, whereas this House oversights the national government and its organs. Therefore, the Senate has no business oversighting organs of the national government. And we represent the people. They represent the institution of the county government and counties. Therefore, I was only making that point clear. Honorable Speaker, moving on to the budget-making process, I want to use Article 114, Honorable Speaker, which is one of the things that has been raised by the Senate. And they have alleged that we use Article 114 to dismiss some of their bills, Honorable Speaker. And I want to illustrate, Honorable Speaker, that Article 114 of the Constitution, and I want to say, Honorable Speaker, because I have done a little bit of research on this, if you look at the constitutions of India in Asia, the Constitution of South Africa, and in fact, the Act of Parliament, I think of 1912 in the UK, has similar provisions almost word for word as what is provided for in Article 114 of our Constitution. And this Article 114 of the Constitution, Honorable Speaker, gives the mandate, the exclusive mandate to the Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Speaker. It gives you the exclusive mandate to determine, one, whether a bill that is being introduced before the House has any money bill effect, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, when bills are introduced to this House or even to Senate, Honorable Speaker, it is only the Speaker of the National Assembly who has the exclusive mandate to determine whether they are money bills or not. And Honorable Speaker, the use of Article 114 and our own standing orders, Honorable Speaker, is not exclusive to bills from the Senate. Members of this House sponsor bills, and they give us, they bring legislative proposals every now and then. In fact, now after the budget process, all we are doing as a Budget and Appropriations Committee is to consider legislative proposals from members. And members in this House know it very well, that it does not matter whether the bill came from Senate, even private members' motions and bills, including my own as chairman, Honorable Speaker. I have sponsored, I have legislative proposals that had to go through the Article 114 process before the Budget and Appropriations Committee and go to the Speaker's office for determination as to whether they have a money bill effect. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, it is not true that this House is using Article 114 to curtail the work of the Senate. Indeed, Honorable Speaker, their own standing orders in the Senate speak to the provisions of Article 114 of the Constitution. And therefore, it is outrageous for them to pretend that Article 114 of the Constitution does not exist. Indeed, Honorable Speaker, it is interesting that somebody can be going to court to claim that a constitutional provision is unconstitutional. And I don't know what then, to them, the Constitution is, if what is provided for in the Constitution in Article 114, they claim to be unconstitutional. Further, Honorable Speaker, I know in resolving the question under Article 110, sub-Article 3 of the Constitution, the Speaker of this House has always formed an opinion on whether a Senate bill is a money bill or not, and reminded the Senate on the provisions of Article 109, sub-Article 5. But they have always disregarded this, Honorable Speaker, and proceeded to originate bills which are money bills, contrary to the provisions of Article 109, sub-Article 5 of the Constitution. And we have records of these bills, Honorable Speaker. If challenged, we can show them and prove to them that those bills that are not money bills we have been able to process, and those that are money bills we have been able to process them in accordance with Article 114 of the Constitution. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, even as I support this, I want to urge the House Business Committee to seek the views of the public as they consider this motion, and to table before us a report that we can consider, Honorable Speaker, and urge Kenyans that even as they are called upon by the House Business Committee to be listened to, let them charge senators to follow.
Very well. Shall we get to that far end? Honorable Mishi.
Asante sana Bwana Spika. Mimi nashukuru sana kupata hii nafasi na kuunga hoja hii ya kiongozi walio wengi, na ningependa kuiongea kwa Kiswahili kwa sababu naona Kimombo kimetembea sana na kuna wale wa mashinani pia wangependa kuelewa mambo ya hoja hii. Kwanza kabisa nataka niseme hoja hii si hoja ya kwamba tunataka kukejeli bunge la Seneti ama pengine tunataka kuleta sitofahamu katika bunge la Seneti. Ni hoja ambayo inataka kuweka mambo yawe sawa kulingana na mujibu wa katiba yetu vile ilivyozungumzia. Tunaona ya kwamba katika kifungu 95-96 katiba yetu imezungumzia majukumu na nguvu za mabunge yetu mawili, bunge la Seneti na bunge hili ambalo tunaliita la National Assembly. Na nataka niseme ya kwamba jambo hili tumelileta kwa sababu kumekuwa na dukuduku kwa wananchi ya kusema ya kwamba pengine pesa zetu zinatumika vibaya ama pengine majukumu yanaweza rudiana. Na kwa mtazamo wangu, mimi nilifahamu ya kwamba bunge la Seneti na bunge la National Assembly ingekuwa kama vile Uingereza, ambapo kuna ile tunaita House of Commons na kuna ile tunaita House of Lords. Na nilielewa ya kwamba ile ilikuwa inaitwa House of Lords ilikuwa ni kama vile Seneti hapa kwetu Kenya, ambapo ni wajumbe ambao sana wanapeana ushauri katika taifa la Kenya na pia wanapeana ushauri katika bunge la kitaifa katika mambo ambayo yanahusu nyanja tofauti. Kwa hivyo basi lazima tuweze kujua haswa majukumu ya bunge la Seneti ni majukumu gani, haswa katika mambo ya miswada ambayo yanatusumbua sana. Na tunaona katika kifungu 111 imezungumzia vizuri sana miswada ambayo inahusika na bunge la Seneti, ambayo ni miswada inauzungumzia majukumu, nguvu ambazo pengine zinaweza kuleta utata katika mambo ya county. Na pia imezungumzia mambo ya uchaguzi wa wale MCAs ama wale maofficers katika county. Na pia imezungumzia mswada ya mambo ya fedha. Na miswada hii yote lazima iwe ni mujibu.
Honorable Mishi, what is it again? Honorable Arati, Simba.
Mr. Speaker, more important.
Order members. Honorable Simba, what is out of order?
Mr. Speaker, there is nothing out of order, but Mr. Speaker, I'm just doing a follow-up on, you have left somebody who is known of thieving, both through the budget and in the public, has spoken and has walked out. Honorable Ichungwa.
Order, Honorable Simba Arati. Order, Honorable Simba. It is you who is completely out of order, Honorable Simba. You cannot refer another member in that manner. You are the one who is out of order. Honorable Mishi.
Asante Bwana Spika.
Order. What is it, Minority Leader? Order, Honorable.
Mr. Speaker, this is a house where we need decorum and to be within the orders of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, you've just had Honorable Simba Arati, who has not even worn proper shoes, although it's expensive. But, Mr. Speaker, he has said that
Honorable Chungwa is known for thieving or stealing, that he's a thief. Mr. Speaker, those are very serious words to utter against a member of parliament. I think he needs to withdraw and apologize. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Completely, Honorable Sibarati, that is completely unacceptable. You must withdraw and apologize. You are referring to another member in that manner.
Thank you,
completely
Mr.
out of order.
Mr. Speaker, a thief is a thief, but I want to
Order,
withdraw.
order, Honorable Sibarati. Order, Honorable Sibarati. You.
Yeah.
Order, Honorable Sibarati.
I withdraw and apologize, but then it remains the
Order,
same.
member. Order, Honorable Sibarati. Honorable Sibarati, you are now moving on a tangent. You are moving on a very dangerous tangent. So we note that you have withdrawn and apologized, but be careful, honorable member. And I am sure this is one of the members I know who understands standing order, but there's some doubt. Honorable Mishi.
Yeah, Bwana Spika, nataka niseme tukiangalia ibara ya 4 kwa wale ambao hawatafahamu ibara ni nini, ni ile 4th schedule. Na ibara ya 4 imezungumzia haswa zile kazi ambazo zinahusu bunge la seneti, limezungumzia ambapo wamezungumzia mambo ya kilimo, wamezungumzia mambo ya afya ambayo yanahusiana na mambo ya county, wamezungumzia pia mambo ya ule usafiri lakini katika upande wa county, wamezungumzia mambo mengi sana ambayo wenzangu waliotangulia wamezungumzia mambo haya. Vile vile pia katika hiyo ibara ya 4 imezungumzia pia yale majukumu ya kitaifa ambayo yanafanywa na bunge la National Assembly. Na iwapo katiba imezungumzia mambo haya kinaga ubwaga, kwa nini tuwe na sitofahamu? Kwa nini tuwe tunafanya rudia ama ile tunasema duplication wakati tunafanya kazi zetu kama wabunge? Tunaona ya kwamba wakati mwingi sana kuna swala limeangaziwa na bunge la seneti, limeangaziwa na bunge la kitaifa, na zile ripoti zinakuwa ni ripoti tofauti, ripoti ambazo zinaleta mgonganisho na tunakosa kuweza kupata mwelekeo. Ni wakati mwafaka tuweze kujua sisi kama taifa na sisi kama viongozi ambao tunajua majukumu yetu, tuweze kujua kamati zile zitatengezwa katika seneti kulingana na majukumu yao na nguvu zao na kazi zao, na zile kamati zitatengezwa katika bunge la kitaifa hili la National Assembly iwe ni kulingana na majukumu yetu na nguvu zetu ambazo tumepatiwa na katiba ya Kenya, pasi na kwenda na kinyume cha katiba. Tunaona ya kwamba katika kifungu 94 mabunge yote mawili yanahitajika kukubali na kulinda katiba yetu, na Mkenya katika kifungu cha 3 katika katiba anahitajika kukubali na kuweza kuilinda katiba. Na kuilinda katiba ni kuilinda kwa kufanya zile kazi ambazo katiba zimetupa sisi kama wabunge katika mabunge haya mawili. Kifungu cha 113, maspika wetu wawili kwa kila wakati wanahitajika kuangalia swala ya kujua ya kwamba je, mswada huu ni mswada wa county ama mswada huu ni mswada ambao utakuwa unasimamia kupitia National Assembly ama hili bunge tunaita bunge la kitaifa. Kwa hivyo nataka niseme, Mheshimiwa Spika, haya mambo ambayo kila saa tunavurutana, sijui tunavurutana kwa nini. Mambo ya kukagua watu walioteuliwa na rais, tumeona ya kwamba ni jukumu la bunge hili la kitaifa linaloitwa National Assembly kulingana na katiba 132(2) ambayo inazungumzia kwamba rais atateua na sisi kama bunge tutaweza kuappoint na kuweza kukagua iwapo yule aliyeteuliwa anaweza kufanya kazi ile. Lakini tunaona ya kwamba hata seneti juzi wameweza kukagua yule tunamuita Inspector General of Police na wakaweza kufanya. Hapo tunaona tunaleta utata na tunaleta sitofahamu katika mambo yetu kama watu wamoja. Nataka niseme ya kwamba mambo haya ya kuwa tunapigana sana inaonyesha ya kwamba hata yale majukumu ya ugatuzi ambayo ugatuzi haswa ilipoletwa ndo tuliweza kuwa na Senate. Senate jukumu lake kubwa ni kuangalia mambo ya county 47 na kuangalia yale mambo ya ugatuzi na zile huduma ambazo tumezileta katika ugatuzi. Je, tutaweza kuzipata kama Wakenya, na kuna changamoto gani, na tutaweza kuangalia nini? Kwa hivyo mambo ambayo tunazungumzia kama mambo ya kilimo, mambo yale ya makavazi, tunasema museum, mambo haya ambayo tunasema pia zile lisensi za mambo ya pombe, mambo ya wanyama, mambo ya zile cemetery tunazungumzia. Haya tusione ni mambo madogo, ni mambo ambayo yanamdhuru mwananchi kila uchao na anakuwa na changamoto nyingi sana. Kwa hivyo lazima sisi tujue kamati tutakazotengeza zitakuwa kamati kulingana na majukumu yetu, kulingana na katiba kifungu 95 na 96. Na iwapo tutakwenda kinyume na hivyo itakuwa si sawa. Wizara kama ile ya defense ni wizara inaangalia mambo ya kitaifa tu, haiangalii mambo ya county. Wizara ya interior inaangalia pia mambo ya usalama wa kitaifa ambayo haiangalii kule katika county. Mambo ya foreign affairs pia inaangalia mambo ya kitaifa. Kwa hivyo hizi wizara ambazo hazina mambo ya ugatuzi, sioni kwa nini waziri aitwe katika seneti azungumzie mambo ambayo ni mambo ya kitaifa, si mambo ya ugatuzi. Lazima tujue mipaka yetu ni nini. Hapa hakuna chakuwa bunge langu ni kubwa na bunge hili jengine ni dogo. Hapa ni kwamba katiba imesema nini, imetupatia nguvu gani, imetupatia majukumu gani, na mipaka yetu itakuwa mpaka.
The Honorable Pukose.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for allowing me to contribute to this very important motion that, Honorable Speaker, pertaining the relationship between the Senate and the National Assembly. Honorable Speaker, we've reached where we are because of failure of systems. It means something is not happening well. It means somebody is not doing his duty well. Honorable Speaker, when the senators sit down to amend a standing order of their House in which they want to reduce the quorum from 15 to being even 1 or 2, then it means things are failing. So, Honorable Speaker, when you go to the constituency or the county, in many of the areas, people will tell you they even don't know their senator. They tell you they voted for the senator and they have not seen the senator since the time they voted. What the Senate has done is to fail in its mandate. Because when you ask the common mwananchi now, what does the senator do? The mwananchi is not able to even tell you the role of the senator. Many of the senators, they'll tell you we see them on the television, we see them maybe on the news, but on the ground, they are not visible, they are not tangible. They have nothing to show for the time they've been in the office. And that's why many of the senators were trying to come up with the money for the oversight.
The Honorable Lesanko, what is out of order? Hold on, Honorable Pukose.
Honorable Speaker, Honorable Simba the Rat is not properly dressed. He's on slippers.
Honorable Sangok, you know, I thought I'm out of order. Thank you.
Proceed. Proceed.
Okay, thank you. So, Honorable Speaker, when you move into the counties, you find that many of the people will not tell you what the senators exactly do. Honorable Speaker, you find that there is also frustration within the government agencies, parastatals, government departments, because when a cabinet secretary is summoned by a similar committee to appear before the Senate, to appear before a similar committee in the National Assembly, to respond to the same matters, it is very frustrating. And it's a waste of government resources, it's a waste of the taxpayers' money to have, for example, you have a committee on energy in the Senate. What does it do? The Constitution only provides for redistribution of power for the counties in Schedule 4. if the constitution is providing that the county shall only be able to do reticulation and issue licenses for the license, the permits for business within the counties, for opening maybe a petrol station and all those other things. What does the senator go to do with summoning a Ministry of Energy, summoning the cabinet secretary, or even the head of a parastatal for Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Ferry Services, Kenya Refinery Services, NOC, and other agencies? So this is very frustrating, Honorable Speaker, and I think it's a high time that this House, and especially even the Parliamentary Service Commission, should look at how many committees should even be in the Senate. Because when you are appropriating money to the various committees, and you have a committee that is duplicating other functions, then surely where are we going as a country? I think these are the matters that we are hoping that when the House Business Committee convenes the meeting, to be able to go and look at these resolutions that the House has made today, you will be able to have public participation, get the input of the people, and let even people decide, do we really need the Senate? And I think it's a honest opinion that the country should be able to discuss whether, and in view of the issue of where we want to even reduce the public expenditure, then we should be able to reduce and have maybe the Senate to be abolished. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, because I want to donate my time to others, I support this House resolution.
Thank you, the Honorable Pukose. The Honorable Atandi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to put my word on this motion. Mr. Speaker, from the word go, I support this motion. But, Mr. Speaker, if you want to know that the Senate is a mischievous organ of this of Parliament, you just need to go through their website, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you will find that in their website, the Senate is profiling itself as the upper house of Parliament. And Mr. Speaker, we know this is not the case. This is not the reality. Mr. Speaker, as somebody who participated in the clamor for the new constitution, let me say that in principle, I do not subscribe to the views that the Senate should be dissolved or disbanded. I think Senate should play an important role as outlined in Article 96, that of protecting devolution. Mr. Speaker, devolution is very important and dear to some of us because devolution was meant to transfer resources from Nairobi to the villages. And in the villages, those are the places where our people live. So, Mr. Speaker, any effort aimed at protecting devolution is something, Mr. Speaker, that I really would like to stand with. But, Mr. Speaker, I disagree with the Senate on one account. One, on their interpretation of Article 95, subsection 5B. Mr. Speaker, this article provides for the oversight function of National Assembly. And Mr. Speaker, we know that this oversight mandate is principally restored in the National Assembly. But Mr. Speaker, Senate has gone ahead to create parallel committees that appear to be doing the same roles that this Parliament, this National Assembly is supposed to do. And Mr. Speaker, I disagree with them because, Mr. Speaker, this particular action has created what I call dysfunctional executive. Today, Mr. Speaker, you will find that ministers alternate between the Senate and National Assembly. No wonder, Mr. Speaker, Kenyans are saying that the executive is not delivering. This is purely the reason why I think, Mr. Speaker, that the Senate has clearly gone out of their mandate, and this, Mr. Speaker, I think they need to be orderly, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's no reason why, just to iterate what my colleagues have said, there's no reason why the Senate should be summoning the Minister for Defense and Foreign Relations, because in their functions, they have nothing to do with those particular national functions. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the Senate needs to be orderly in this respect. Mr. Speaker, you remember that there was a matter to do with the Ruaraka land, where a committee of this House went through that petition. and took a decision. Mr. Speaker, the Senate did the same, and they came up with their own parallel and different decision on the same matter. Mr. Speaker, when that happened, this House was portrayed as a House which is not effective, as a House which does not know what it is doing, and I think the Senate did this action in bad faith to malign and to make this House dishonorable. I think the Senate has been mischievous, and I think this motion that we are discussing today is timely. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to say something on the Division of Revenue Bill. Mr. Speaker, one of the functions of the National Assembly, according to Article 95, subsection D, says the National Assembly shall determine the allocation of national revenue between the levels of government as provided for in Part 4 of Chapter 12 of the Constitution and appropriate funds for expenditure by the national government and the other state organs. Mr. Speaker, this provision is very clear, that the function of determining revenue between levels of government is restoring the National Assembly. But, Mr. Speaker, it goes further to say that the National Assembly shall make reference to Chapter 12 of the Constitution, subsection 4. Mr. Speaker, this is the section that creates what we call the Commission for Revenue Allocation. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to read for you what this Part 4 says. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution says in Chapter 12, Part 4, that the Commission for Revenue, this is a part that creates the Commission for Revenue Allocation. And, Mr. Speaker, we know that this commission is supervised, is oversighted by this House, the Parliamentary Committee on Finance. But, Mr. Speaker, one of the mandates of this commission, if I may read, the principal function of the Commission on Revenue Allocation is to make recommendations concerning the basis for equitable sharing of revenue raised by the national government between the national government and county governments in A and B among county governments. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution says that national assemblies, in their decision to determine what resources should go to national government and county government, they must refer to the function of the Commission for Revenue Allocation. Mr. Speaker, I want to disagree with the National Assembly on this particular matter. Because, Mr. Speaker, when we disagree with the Senate on Division of Revenue Bill, we are not disagreeing with the Senate, we are disagreeing with the commoners, the people we elected who are in the villages. When we are saying, Mr. Speaker, that we need to reduce the amount of resources that should go to counties, we are not fighting the Senate, Mr. Speaker, we are fighting our voters. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to know, Mr. Speaker, this is a house of debate, and I must debate. I must speak my mind. Mr. Speaker, I want to understand the basis for which this House has refused to give counties more resources. I have said, Mr. Speaker, that I'm one of the people who fought for the new Constitution. And, Mr. Speaker, I took 7 years in the university for a course that I should have done for 4 years because I wanted more resources to be taken to my people in the villages. So, Mr. Speaker, this House cannot be a House that is deducting resources that should go to the commoners in the villages. Mr. Speaker, on this account, I want to understand how the Senate has refused if the Senate, if National Assembly, in their process of sharing the resources equitably, they are taking into consideration the contribution of a commission which is funded by this House, the CRA. We have given CRA about 600 million, Mr. Speaker, this financial year, so that they are able to advise this Parliament on how to share equitably the resources of government. But, Mr. Speaker, we cannot have this commission sitting, and when they give us their views, we ignore, simply because our mandate is to share the resources. Mr. Speaker, on this one, I want to tell this House that they also need to shape up on this particular one, because we need to have more resources going to our people. We fought for revolution, Mr. Speaker. The party I represent in this House, Mr. Speaker, is a party that has fought for revolution. As we are even saying, Mr. Speaker, that in the upcoming referendum, we want more money to be given to counties. We want counties to receive 40% of the national resources. But, Mr. Speaker, we cannot sit here, Mr. Speaker, as a House and ignore these facts and reduce allocations to counties and still believe that we are fighting the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I support this motion, but this matter really, this House must keep itself to this matter, must address itself to this matter of the division of revenue bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
The Honorable Shamala. Shamala.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this very important motion. Mr. Speaker, I cannot overstress that actually the role of the Senate is representation, protection, and the interests of the counties. Their functions are so extremely clear, and indeed it is set out in Schedule 4 in the Constitution. However, we begin to see, and I've heard various bodies and institutions, more so those that report to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, complaining of these rogue summons that are coming from the Senate. The Senate, if they really, really wanted to contribute, and we don't feel their impact at the county level, they could deal with issues of animal husbandry, they could deal with issues of noise pollution. These are not fickle things. If you look at the county of Nairobi, Kenyans are not able to sleep at night because there is a bar in every corner, a bar next to every school, booming music up to 3, 4 in the morning. We have never heard the Senate address these issues. What happened to the regulations? What happened to the legislation that said you cannot have a bar within X number of kilometers of a school? We have never seen them addressing issues like that. More shockingly, recently, driving in a residential area where there are apartment blocks jutting out of the wall of an apartment block, I saw a mortuary in the Kilimani area. How is it that where people are living, you have morgues, and the Senate is quiet on this, and yet they are supposed to oversight the issues with regards to county governments? Mr. Speaker, sir, I also wish to address the issue of legislative oversight. Indeed, it has been mentioned by one of the members of Parliament this morning that you will see now that the Senate wants to get involved in delegated legislation. This committee is in the National Assembly, and it is only the Committee of Delegated Legislation within the National Assembly that has the authority as provided for in law to deal with issues regarding subsidiary legislation. I personally think that the Senate has to ask some very serious questions and do some soul searching and ask themselves, are they actually want to be MPs and governors who are just transiting through the Senate? With those few remarks, I support this very important motion.
Thank you for being very brief, the Honorable Shamala. We shall have the Honorable Manzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute on this important motion. Mr. Speaker, a lot has been said and the law has already been pleaded in this House, and I want to rectify or correct some of the notions which may not have followed the law, Mr. Speaker. For example, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of revenue allocation, Mr. Speaker, this is majorly a matter of the two houses and originates from the National Assembly, and I have had an opportunity to sit in the mediation committees before between the National Assembly and the Senate, and I believe one time Senator Wako was chairing, the matters were polished out very clearly, and clearly there were no differences between the National Assembly and the Senate as such. Both of them form the Parliament of the House, and there are distinct roles which are clearly outlined in the Constitution by the people of Kenya. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, when it is an issue of additional of money in a budget, like there is an issue right now, Mr. Speaker, what the Senate should simply do is to approach the CS, the CS, the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Finance or Treasury, and the matter will be sorted at the Treasury level, since we have already passed it here, and that's what mediation could also come up with. In that mediation, they must invite the technicians of the budget to be able to clear that, and that's a matter of treasury and will be sorted out by treasury. In the event there's a deficit, as I've heard the governors ask for more billions, which clearly are not be oversighted properly at the counties. Mr. Speaker, what should be happening is that should come under supplementary, so that the counties can get doing a very important job of devolution, which Kenyans have found very useful. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that devolution is very important in this country. And without devolution, there will be no counties. And since Kenyans have already established devolution in Kenya and through the counties, we have to make sure that devolution works, Mr. Speaker. And one of the organs which is very important to make sure that devolution is effective is Senate. But what is happening across the country, you find that there is no proper oversight of the counties, Mr. Speaker. And you'll find that there is, for example, the county councils used to do better in a matter of garbage collection all over the country. I'm not saying particular county, but if you move around, you find garbage burning in quite a number of important towns in almost every county in the country. And I believe that's one of the things, because of cleanliness, issues of health, issues of devolution, issues of water. There's so many issues, Mr. Speaker, even with the budget we provide, that has not been covered. And even a lot of the counties, Mr. Speaker, have not used their budget sufficiently. And therefore, I believe if the Senate was to call itself back to order, it has more work than it can imagine. And it has a lot to do yet, and that work has not been covered year by year. So I believe Senate is important, devolution is important. Senate has just got to follow the law, because the law is still very clear. There is really nothing to seek interpretations for in the courts. And even if you are to go to the courts follow the law. The courts are not going to invent the law. They're only going to interpret the law, which is very clear. And I believe the courts will tell them clearly, devolution is important. Do your work to oversight the counties so that we have effective management of our resources. So far, Mr. Speaker, I want really to state, Senate has failed in that particular regard. We have passed quite a number of laws, Mr. Speaker, which we are required by the law to do. We have been able to make sure that laws originating from the Senate are processed quickly through this assembly so that devolution can be effective. So we have managed even the County Governments Act. All the laws are brought here. We have made sure they are given priority. We have debated them, and we have released them for assent so that the country can be served better. So I believe, Mr. Speaker, and on part of ourselves, we've done our duty very diligently, and we pass all the necessary laws. And if in the event there are mistakes, because mistakes can occur, there are proper channels of rectifying those mistakes so that we can serve Kenyans effectively. So I still really want to challenge Senate to really rein on the counties as it's supposed to do under the law, to make sure that the counties are properly oversighted. On the matter of Statutory Instruments Act, which now the Senate want to become part of, we have an assembly, and we have a national assembly, and we have county assemblies. County assemblies also oversight the executive in the county. And in their own setups, they have a similar structure, which can make sure that the regulations, and the laws passed at that level are properly executed. So there is no role, absolutely, of the Senate when it comes to implementation of the Statutory Instruments Act. In fact, that particular act, if it were to be amended, Mr. Speaker, it will still come back to this House so that we are the ones to deal with it. And the law is very clear that the Senate has no role in this particular act of Parliament. And therefore, since there is a lot for them to do, the best thing is for every person who's been elected in this country by Kenyans who are expecting service to rethink, to solve such, and to properly check the counties without fear or favor, or even without wanting to save a governor, so that one day a senator can also ascend to become a governor. You must deal with that governor thoroughly. You must deal with his infrastructure thoroughly. If they are not following the law, if they are misusing funds, if the assembly is misguided in one way or another, it is the role of the Senate to make sure each and every assembly follows the law, is effective, and serves Kenyans as required by the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support, and I thank you.
The Honorable Limo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute to this very important motion, Mr. Speaker. And this motion really, Mr. Speaker, has come at the right time. In fact, it is long overdue, Mr. Speaker, because we have been having this kind of confusion for a very long time. Even in the 11th Parliament, Mr. Speaker, this was actually, the genesis of this confusion was started by the ruling, which was made by one of the courts in this country, where an issue which is very, very clear, black and white, on the roles of the two houses of parliament when it comes to revenue issues. The Constitution is very clear on who decides the division of revenue between two levels of government. Under Article 95, Mr. Speaker, this is a house which determines the division between the two levels of government. The Constitution, under Article 95, is very specific that the Senate will determine the allocation among the county governments. That means after we determine what the county government's share is, they divide among the 47. Mr. Speaker, this House, this National Assembly, is on record having been the only house which actually respects the Constitution. We have never had a situation where we summon governors to this House. We have never had that. We have never had a situation where we discuss issues touching on counties, because the Constitution is clear that that is the role of the Senate. But now, the senators, when you see senators talking about national government, when you see senators summoning the cabinet secretaries, when you see senators running up and down and summoning institutions over issues which are purely a national government, including the issues of KQ, including the issues of KPA, which has nothing to do with devolution, we clearly see a house which is confused. It doesn't know its role. Mr. Speaker, when I go to the issues of appointments made by the president are specifically very clear under Article 132 of the Constitution, where it is very specific that certain listed appointments made by the president will be confirmed by this House, which is the National Assembly. And in fact, under Article 132F, Mr. Speaker, 132(2)F, Mr. Speaker, it specifically says any other state officer who has not been listed but appointed by the president will be confirmed by the National Assembly. And therefore, when the issue of Inspector General came in fact, we should not have respected, or we should not have agreed to the formation of a joint committee, because the Constitution is clear. We should have actually followed Article 132 on the roles of the president and how those appointments done by the president should be transacted. And we finish it in this House. In fact, the Inspector General should have actually refused to appear before the joint committee and insisted that he is a law-abiding individual. Mr. Speaker, when you see a house or when you see an institution which is leaving its role and following the roles of another institution, it clearly shows that it is an idle institution. I can give you an example. If a CEO and a chairman of a parastatal are entangled in confusion, the institution will not move. If you appoint a chairman, and the chairman is very idle, and you allow that chairman to be hovering around the corridors of a parastatal, the CEO will not work. What does it tell you? You know, the Constitution did not provide enough work for the Senate. That is why they are idle. They're idling around and hovering around looking for work to do. Why? Because the drafters of the Constitution, which in fact, Honorable Jeremiah Kioni here will attest to that you participated in the drafting of the Constitution. The drafters of the Constitution actually had in mind that the Senate will be a part-time house. If you go to jurisdictions like Vietnam, Senate operates very well. Why? Because their constitution is very clear that they meet quarterly. Singapore and others, name them. If we want to make the Senate relevant, we must change the constitution and have them meet quarterly only to review certain issues, including allocation of revenue amongst counties. Once they finish, they go back home and they wait for other work. If there is any participation, you know, the Constitution talks about, it doesn't talk about Senate legislating. It talks about participating in legislation. Participating is what looks like what the late Michuki had said in consultation. It doesn't mean concurrence. You know, it is like, you know, after we legislate, the Senate should be only asked, what is your view? Then they say their view, and they go back home. So this is a house which should be advisory. And if, indeed, if you look at how the role of the Senate when it comes to the issues of impeachment of the president and the deputy president, it is only very specific that those are the only two roles. They do not participate in impeachment of any other state officer. All other state officers are under the armpit of the National Assembly, and therefore, the House Business Committee, which will consider and bring a report to this House, should specifically specify that Senate should only be able to call one cabinet secretary, and that is the cabinet secretary responsible for devolution. And that is the only cabinet secretary who will then link the Senate to the national government, because there is no need of bringing confusion. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying this. The Constitution is clear on the roles of this House. I want to conclude by asking questions, which we don't need answers for that. We must ask ourselves, who approves the appointment of cabinet secretaries? It is this House. Who approves the Attorney General? It is this House. Who approves the Secretary of the Cabinet? This is the House. Mr. Speaker, who approves the principal secretaries? This is the National Assembly. Who approves the appointment of high commissioners? It is the National Assembly. Who approves the appointment of the Director of Public Prosecution? It is this House. Mr. Speaker, who approves the controller of budget? This is the House. Finally, who approves all commissioners of constitutional commissions? This is the House. What it tells you is, it follows that any other important role is done by this House. And therefore, there is no need of debating around. In fact, when there is a debate of changing the Constitution and even reducing the number of MPs, I am a finance person, and I understand very well. The budget of the National Assembly, combined with that of judiciary, is only 2%, maximum of 2% of the total budget. So we will not be saving anything by reducing the number of members, but we will save the country if we restructure the roles and make it very clear, the roles of the Senate, so that they become a part-time House, and that is it. And therefore, if the senators who are sitting in Senate are actually salivating on the roles of the National Assembly, let them wait for 2022 vie and come to this house. Look for constituency. Be a man enough. Fight for it and come to this National Assembly. And then let us allow those who are able and willing to serve as senators serve in that Senate. So I urge the House Business Committee to move with speed, come up with a report on how our cabinet secretaries and how the national government officers should operate, and we reinforce their role and ensure we protect them against the confusion being created by Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Limo, probably one of the questions you might have forgotten is who can punish those officers that you have listed in the event that they err. We shall have contribution from the Honorable Milemba Omboko.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this chance to make a contribution. I think the situation in which we are operating is simply as a result of, like earlier speakers referred to the Senate as a baby that has been unable to move. Article 93 establishes Parliament in Kenya. And where the challenge is coming is that the Senate has misunderstood the role and the wordings in the Constitution. In Kenya, we have the Parliament, but that Parliament is bicameral. So there are two houses, Honorable Speaker. We have the National Assembly, and then we have the Senate. The word Parliament in the Kenyan situation can be equated to the term Congress in America. And in America, Congress then has two houses. That is the House of Representatives, and then we have the Senate. If you tried another jurisdiction, like Britain, then you'll still get Parliament. But that particular Parliament has got two houses. That's the House of Lords, and then we have the House of Commons. Now, what the Senate unfortunately is doing and trying then to make these issues come up is to take the title, the original big title, in Kenya being Parliament, in Britain being Parliament, in the USA being the Congress. And they want to usurp all the powers, for instance, if we're talking in the jurisdiction of the USA, the Congress. Yet, sections 96 and 95 come down to clearly define what are the roles of these two houses that form the original big name. I'm talking about this, Honorable Speaker, because I'm an authority teacher in history and government, and this is the work I've done for a long time. So therefore, the Senate is usurping the functions of the National Assembly in Kenya and trying to replace anywhere they see Senate with Parliament, which will never have been the case in the original case, because they must stick to their functions as Senate. Now,
Honorable members, the Honorable Limo, you are heard in silence.
Now,
kindly allow the Honorable member for Emuhaya to also be heard.
Yes, yes,
the Honorable Limo and the Honorable Jeremiah Kione.
So when you look
the Honorable
at...
Limo, are we in the same house? The Honorable Kione.
So, thank you, Honorable Speaker. So when you look at the origin of the history of the two houses, that's the only area I will try to punch, because many of the parliamentarians have punched the many other areas that relate to us. In the US itself, for instance, they only adopted the upper house and the lower house, and the Senate in that particular case, because they were having challenges. Number one was the historical perspective. They were getting independence from Britain, and they really wished to have the structure that Britain was having. Number two, at the Philadelphian Conference, where they were taking too long to make a decision on whether to move forward or not, there was the so-called the Great Compromise. And the small states felt they needed to be protected. And that's why in the Great Compromise, then they said, whether you are small or big, you will have two in the Senate. But in the House of Representatives, we shall give you members depending on the population that you have. Political scientists and historians have even since questioned the Great Compromise. Now, if you look at the case study in Kenya, Kenya equally went the same direction. We needed to protect the regional governments that were here. And I think Honorable Mbadi talked about it. Then we needed to also assure the minority in Kenya that they will be protected. So when the new constitution was being created, Honorable Speaker, the roles that were given to the Senate were mainly derived from the protective role of the minority and the county government as it is, and a little bit was usurped from the former functions of the regional governments and municipal governments. And that's why you have seen their roles, like in refuse collection, which some people have used here derogatively and should not be derogative, is taking that kind of nature. Unfortunately, the Senate has misinterpreted the law and wants to usurp all the powers that should be taken by Parliament. But remember, the National Assembly has got its own powers, while the Senate has got its own powers separately. So moving forward then, it means that we need to bring the Senate to some kind of check. Otherwise, we shall have to do what happened in 1963, 1966, when it had to be removed. Because currently the Kenyans are complaining that there's so much money going to Parliament. It's because we have duplication of roles. And it has been talked about, the issues of oversight, the issues of committees that where they should not go to. They have created many committees, while at the same time, the Senate, in the Senate, everybody is a vice chairman, he's a chairman, because they are few. So we have to remove those roles which they have taken from the National Assembly. And then they stick to their roles as Senate. That will keep a harmonious bicameral system operating in Kenya. And I therefore would want to support greatly this motion and ask the leader to move very quickly in the House Business Committee to bring a report so that we can actually streamline the Senate. This time round, we don't need to remove it because we have the power, we have the reason, and we have the might here to actually streamline the system so that they stick to their role and do not start overstepping. With those very few remarks, I wish to support.
The Honorable Kihara Wanjiru, member for Naivasha. Not desiring to be in the House, we shall have the Honorable Jeremiah Kioni, member for Ndaragwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity. I'll use very few minutes so that I can allow other members to say something. One is that what was delivered at I think the Supreme Court during 11 Parliament was not a judgment. It was an advisory opinion, and I think it is important that we have it right. Two, Mr. Speaker, the appointment of the IG, if we allowed it to be done through a joint committee, it can easily be charged in a court of law, in a constitutional court, and the IG can easily be declared as being unconstitutionally appointed into office. Because some of these things we've been doing to massage the egos of others, but they are not constitutional, and we need to be clear in our minds. Mr. Speaker, I think the immediate speaker has alluded to what I wanted to say. One of the things that informed us at Naivasha for us to create this Senate was the fear by some quarters, and justified fears, that devolution would be killed the way it was killed back in 1963. And it is for that reason that we said, let's create a Senate so that we also deal with the fears of those who, and there were genuine fears, because none of us could justify or could cushion the other, or assure the other that it's not going to die. So Senate was then created, and there was nothing much that it was given to do. But if I was the Speaker of the Senate, I want to assure you that you can create so much work for the Senate that is not contradictory to the laws that have been given to this National Assembly. But there is, I think, there is lack of imagination of the amount of work that they can do, and members have alluded to it. But let me also say, Mr. Speaker, that devolution as it is in this country today, it is not being protected by the Senate. It is not being protected by the executive, nor is it being protected by this National Assembly. The people who are protecting devolution are the people of this country. That is why we said, if you want to do anything on devolution, you must have a referendum, so that the Kenyans themselves will agree to it being altered, or it's being increased or removed. As members of the National Assembly, we are only a conveyor belt. Senate is also just a conveyor belt. The Kenyans themselves have a final say on the nature and the form of devolution that we have in this country. Mr. Speaker, I think it's also important that we note another very fundamental issue. In the Senate, all those people who've been nominated, none of them has a vote. And I think Kenyans need to know this. Any person nominated to the Senate will never vote for 5 years. You only walk around here in these corridors, have a cup of tea, go and listen to what people say. You may be given an opportunity to persuade a debate, but you don't have a vote because you don't represent any person. You don't represent people. Senate represents the institution of devolution. The house that represents people is the National Assembly. That is why also the issue of budget making has been left with the people's representatives. You cannot take the budget making process to an institution that represents other institutions. And this thing of saying that the Senate has a role in the budget making is completely misplaced. You have no law. You see, there is the statement that says there's no taxation without representation. So how can you take the issues of taxation to a house that does not represent people? That is why matters of money, matters of taxation, matters of budget making, even allocation of resources will be done at the National Assembly. I am telling you, Mr. Chairman, as a speaker, Mr. Speaker, as the chairman of CIOC, Constitutional Implementation Oversight Committee, I recently walked over to the chairman of COJ, Governor Oparanya, and we had a debate on this issue. And I told him that why the governors seem to be lost and even losing money, by the debate that we have had, with having perhaps an inadequate allocation of resources, is because they have also not understood clearly. If I was a governor and I was the chairman of COG, I would engage this National Assembly directly. They are the ones who deal with allocation of resources. They are the ones who give ministries money. So when you go to the Senate, what have you gone to tell them? You are crying to people who are also crying. You are going to tell people to do things they have no mandate to do. They cannot influence the budget-making process. But once we have agreed on the sharing, the vertical sharing, then they have the law to agree this county government can be given this amount of money, that county government can be given that amount of money. But not how much national government gets, how much devolution gets. That is not their law. That is the law of the people's representative. And these issues are so clear, but I think there are people who have decided to just confuse others in that. And I think I want to agree with what was suggested. Because of that debate, and this whole debate happened at Naivasha, it is true, Mr. Speaker, that at one point we left it that the Senate will be meeting 4 times in a year. But again, because we wanted this constitution to pass without too much opposition, there was that issue of just keeping quiet, not wanting to debate on that aspect on how often should they meet. But I want to again reiterate, Mr. Speaker, that the Speaker of the Senate and the leadership of the Senate can easily create a lot of work for themselves if they just choose to look at the areas that are available. And they have a lot of work that they can be doing throughout the period, as opposed to what is happening today. But it's also absurd, Mr. Speaker, when you have a committee of 2 people and you have called the whole ministry to come and do a presentation to a committee of 2 senators, and the quorum is 2. I think quorum is 1. Because they cannot, it's very difficult to get the quorum in the Senate, because again, the work they want to take on, they don't even have numbers that can be able to take on those numbers. So I think it is not fair for this country. The senators are people we respect. I have always, there before, Mr. Speaker, I held the position that we needed to scrap the Senate. I have changed that view. I think we need the Senate, but they need to think and become imaginative on the work that they can do, because sooner than later, they will get themselves in trouble if they continue trying to encroach on laws that are clearly left to the people's representative. Mr. Speaker, finally, let me say this. If you have the senator of Kakamega, for example, he has about 11 constituencies or 12, I think, and you have the senator of Lamu, and he has about 2 constituencies. How can you equate that voting? How can a senator representing 11 constituencies be at the same footing with a senator representing 2 constituencies? That is why you cannot give them the mandate to decide on people's issues. Mr. Speaker, I want to support this approach by the House Business Committee. It is important that this issue be put to rest. And as my colleagues have said, we expect also the courts to look at the Constitution and not be persuaded by anything else but what is provided for in our Constitution and for the good of this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Baya, yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. I would like to say this, that, you know, when two people want to do the same thing all the time, in my mother tongue they say, then one is unnecessary. What we have is a Senate that tries as much as possible to want to do what the National Assembly is doing. Now, when you have a situation like that, then you end up with what we have.
The Honorable Baya, I'll have to interrupt you. We have reached 1 o'clock. You will have 9 minutes when this matter is again set down for consideration. Honorable members. The time being 1 p.m., this House stands adjourned till Wednesday, 3rd July 2019 at 2:30 p.m.